Picture a house, not a palace, not a mansion. A solid, handsome Georgian townhouse on one of London's better streets. The kind of address that tells you at a glance that the people inside have done well. Portland stone façade, pale and well cut. The mortar joints tight and even. Symmetrical sash windows, 6 panes above and 6 below. The glazing bars as fine as a good cabinet maker's work. A front door the colour of night with a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. Polished every second morning to a shine you could use as a mirror if you bent close enough. Iron railings along the pavement edge, black and straight. A coal hole in the paving stones, a small round iron lid you could cover with the heel of your boot, through which coal descends by gravity and good luck into the cellar below. The kind of house that says, the people who live here have done very well indeed. The kind of house that says, warmth is the last thing anyone needs to worry about. Now picture January 1733 to be exact. London, near Piccadilly, which at this hour, 5:30 in the morning, is already making its first sounds. The rumble of a dray cart somewhere on the main road, the distant bark of a dog, the bells of St. James's beginning their first count of the day. January in London is a particular thing. The cold here is not the clean country cold of an open field or a clear night sky. It is something denser. The cold of 500,000 people pressed together in a city where the coal smoke never entirely lifts, where the river breathes cold air up through every lane and alley, where the stone of the buildings, the walls, the floors, the steps, has been absorbing winter since October and will not release it until April. Now picture yourself inside that house, not in the parlour, not in the library with its mahogany shelves and Turkey carpet, not in the master bedroom with its velvet bed curtains and bracket clock on the marble mantelpiece. Those aren't your rooms. Picture yourself in the attic. Your breath is making clouds. There is frost on the inside of your window. Not the outside, the inside. The glass that is supposed to stand between you and January. The glass that is supposed to constitute the only boundary between the cold and the not cold. This glass has ice crystals on its inner surface. You can see them by the grey pre-dawn light filtering through from the street below. Feather shapes, fern shapes, the geometries that water makes when it freezes slowly and patiently on a surface that has been cold for 7 hours. You reach out one finger and touch the frost. It is exactly as cold as it looks. You're inside a house that burns 800 pounds of coal every 2 weeks in winter. You're inside a house with 6 fireplaces, all of them burning from morning until 11 at night. You're inside one of the better houses on one of the better streets in the most prosperous city in the world, and there is frost on the inside of your window. Here is the other thing, the thing that will take you the whole of this winter to fully understand. If you were to get up right now, pull on your cloak, go down all 5 flights of stairs, push open the front door and step out into Sackville Street, it would be warmer out there. Not warm, not summer. It is January in London, and the air will find your ears in seconds and fill your lungs with something that feels nearly solid. But warmer than this attic, warmer than this house, warmer than the building where 6 fires burn. The street is warmer than the house. I make these episodes, and I genuinely don't know whether you're listening to fall asleep or whether you're awake at some hour that doesn't quite have a name yet, wanting to be somewhere else for a while, wanting to live in a different body in a different time. Either way, get comfortable. Pull something warm over you. Pull it up properly. This story's about cold. And there is something about a well-told story that makes the listener feel the thing being described. I want you to feel warm while you hear about cold. Here we go. Your name is Sarah Fletcher. You're 16 years old. You arrived in London 14 days ago from Shrewsbury in Shropshire, which is a market town near the Welsh border. 3 days' journey by stagecoach on roads that are perfectly manageable in September and an adventure in December. The journey cost your father 4 shillings he didn't entirely have to spare. 4 shillings that constituted a vote of confidence in this plan of such weight that it has not stopped feeling heavy since the moment you climbed up into the coach and watched your mother's face through the window until the road turned and she was gone. You arrived at London Bridge at 3:30 on a December afternoon. You came into the city from the south, over the bridge, and your first sight of London was what everyone's first sight of London is from that direction. The city rising across the river, the steeples of 50 churches, the rooftops stretching left and right as far as you could see in either direction, smoke rising from what seemed like 1,000 chimneys into a sky the colour of cold pewter. Your first thought was, I have never seen anything this large. Your second thought, which surprised you, it is warmer here. You had expected London in December to feel colder than Shrewsbury. Cities seemed cold in the stories, cold and grey and enormous. But coming over London Bridge you felt warmth rising from the stones, a collective warmth that had nothing to do with any single fire or any single building, but was the product of all of it together. The bodies of 500,000 people, the thousands of animals, the hundreds of trades, all of it happening simultaneously in a space far too small to hold it comfortably, and all of it generating heat the way any concentrated life generates heat. You thought, good, I will be warm here. You were both right and entirely wrong, and the story of how you were both at once is the story of this winter. The position at number 14 Sackville Street was arranged through a letter of introduction from the vicar's wife in Shrewsbury, who had a cousin who knew a woman whose husband had corresponded with Mr. Aldgate's father on a matter of trade, which is the kind of chain of social connection that gets 16-year-old girls from market towns placed in London service when nothing else would get them there. Mr. Thomas Aldgate, linen merchant of established reputation, number 14 Sackville Street near Piccadilly, a good house, a fair employer, meals and a room, and a wage of £2 10 shillings per year, paid quarterly. Your mother helped you pack the box. Your father shook your hand, which was unusual and meant more than the handshake itself. Your younger sister, who is 14 and practical in ways that have always slightly intimidated you, said, "Write to us." She said it as an instruction, not a request. You have written once. You told them about the streets and the noise and the size of everything. You told them you were well. You did not tell them about the cold, because the cold was still presenting itself as something you hadn't yet worked out, and worrying your mother with an unfinished problem seemed unkind. Now you are working it out, your eyes open to darkness. For half a second, barely that, you don't know where you are. The darkness is complete. The cold is the first thing, and your body makes its habitual morning inventory before your mind has fully arrived. Attic ceiling with its slope on the left side where the roof comes down, window opposite with the grey pre-dawn light coming through, door at the far end, chest in the corner where your dress and apron wait, nail on the wall where your cloak hangs, this room, this house, London. Yes, the cold is not the first thing you notice. It is not something you notice at all, not any more, not after 2 weeks of this. It is the medium in which you exist in this room, the way water is the medium fish exist in. You have been breathing cold air for 7 hours. The straw mattress under you has been slowly surrendering the warmth your body gave it over the night, losing ground to the stone floor below and the cold air above. The wool blanket over you, good heavy blanket, your mother helped you choose it, has maintained a zone of relative warmth around your body that is, right now, the most valuable square yard in number 14 Sackville Street. You lie still for another moment, listening. The house at this hour has its own sounds, different from the day's sounds, thinner and more separate. The tick of the bracket clock on the second floor, just audible through 2 floors of stone and timber. A mouse in the wall, very faint, from outside the pre-dawn street. A cart's wheels on the stones somewhere on Piccadilly, deliberate and echoing in a way they don't at noon when the city covers such sound with itself. You count to 3 and get up. The floor meets your bare feet, and the cold is immediate and total. A cold that moves from your soles up through your ankles and shins in a single second. The kind of cold that feels like a statement rather than a temperature. You were told to keep your stockings on in bed. Agnes told you this on your 3rd morning. Mrs. Hartley told you this on your 5th. Both of them with the tone of people who learned this lesson once, the hard way, and are trying to save you the same tuition. But your stockings were damp from the afternoon. You stepped in something near the pump, and your right stocking was wet until you changed it late in the day, and the clean stockings had been lying in the cold air of your room for 8 hours, and putting them on would have meant cold wet feet replaced by cold dry feet. And in that particular exhausted calculus you had chosen neither. You are now reassessing that decision. The dress, on the chest where you left it. You pull it on fast, arms through, fabric finding your skin with cold, the same cold that the kettle holds before it's heated. A cold that is the absence of warmth rather than the presence of anything. Good woolen broadcloth, a sensible dress made to last. Not the finest, but solid. The weave tight enough that it keeps out wind and holds in body heat once it gets started on doing so. In summer, this dress is simply a dress. In January, in this attic room, it is a cold object that will borrow your warmth for the first 2 minutes before it agrees to function as insulation, and you have learned to accept those 2 minutes as the toll the morning charges you for the rest of the day. Apron over the dress, cap tied at your chin, stockings, shoes. The right shoe has a worn patch at the heel you've been meaning to bring to Mrs. Hartley's attention, because the cobbler on Duke Street will fix it for 2p, but the 2p has been waiting for a moment that hasn't quite arrived. You open the door. The corridor is colder than the room. This is always the case, and you know it now, and knowing it doesn't stop the cold from being a fact when you step into it. The room has had your body in it for 7 hours. Not enough to warm it, but enough to take the sharpest edge off, the way a dog sleeping in a kennel takes the edge off the kennel's cold without turning it warm. The corridor has had nothing. It is a stone passage at the top of a stone building, and the cold in it has been accumulating since the baize door was closed at 11 last night, settling and concentrating in the way cold settles when nothing disturbs it. You move quickly down the stairs. This is the thing nobody tells you when you come to work in a house like this. The staircase is a map of the building's thermal history. You descend through it every morning and your body reads it the way a hand reads a wall. Attic level. Here, at the top, the building's farthest removed from any fire, the deepest cold, still and settled. 1 flight down, the 3rd floor where the nursery is. The cold is the same, but there is the faintest warmth along the interior wall where the nursery chimney breast runs. When the nursery fire goes at 7 in the evening, the surrounding brickwork absorbs some of that warmth, holds it through the night, and releases a ghost of it here. Not enough to feel it unless you know to feel for it, but it is there. Down to the second floor, the family's bedrooms. Here the cold changes. Modulates is the right word, becomes less absolute. The master bedroom fire burned until 11 o'clock last night. Stone holds warmth the way it holds cold, and the walls on this floor have been slowly giving back what they stored, and the air here is 1 or 2 degrees less brutal than the attic. Not warm, but less. Down to the first floor, down the back stairs, the servants' stairs, stone treads worn smooth at the centre and slightly rougher at the edges, the wear of decades of feet going the same direction at the same hours doing the same work. Through the baize door, the cold of the kitchen passage meets you immediately, but it is a different cold from the attic cold. This cold has company. The smell of cold ash first, the mineral dryness of a fire that burned out hours ago, the ghost of yesterday's heat turned inside out. Under that, the ghost of yesterday's cooking, the mutton broth that simmered most of the afternoon, its fat and root vegetable smell faint now and slightly rancid in the cold air. Under that, the damp stone smell of a basement in winter, the smell of London clay and groundwater and centuries of the same cold and damp moving through the same walls. And underneath everything, constant as breathing, the sweet dark mineral smell of coal, Newcastle coal, the good grade, what Mr. Aldgate orders, because quality coal burns longer and cleaner than the cheaper grades, and over a winter this difference adds up. You push into the kitchen. The kitchen is large. It needs to be, for a household of 8, 4 family members, 4 servants. It is basement level, below the street, the pavement visible through the small window above the stone sink at a level that shows you boots and wheels and the hems of coats, the street conducting its business at eye level with you when you stand at the sink, the world going past above you and indifferent to the fact of you. The walls are thick London brick, good clay from the Surrey pits, 1.5 feet at the outer face. The floor is large flat stone flags, worn smooth in the traffic areas, slightly rough at the edges where no foot ever goes. The ceiling is low, lower than the family rooms above, which have their 12-foot Georgian ceilings. And this is the first good thing about the kitchen. The warm air that rises from the fire stays at a useful height, 5 or 6 feet up where people actually are, rather than pooling 15 feet overhead where it warms nothing. The fireplace takes up most of one wall, enormous, a grate nearly 4 feet wide and 3 feet tall, a cavity above for pots, an iron crane on the left with hooks for the heavier vessels, a spit mechanism that replaced the turnspit dog 2 years ago, according to Agnes, who misses the dog on sentimental grounds and for no other reason because the jack works better. A bread oven cut into the brick on the right, with an iron door that has left decades of black streaks on the surrounding brickwork like the marks of old storms, and at the back of the hearth the mound of last night's ash. You kneel down on the stone flags, cold through the kneecap, through the broadcloth, the kind of cold that is an immediate local fact, and you reach for the poker. This is the morning's first negotiation. Whether last night's fire left anything living, Mrs. Hartley banks it at 11, pressing the coals to the centre of the grate and covering them with ash, closing the damper down but not entirely shut, just enough to slow the combustion to almost nothing without stopping it altogether. If she judges it right, and she usually does, there is a coal at the centre of the mound that has been burning very slowly for 6 hours, and is now at 5:30 still breathing. You rake the ash forward gently, grey and lighter grey, the ash spilling onto the hearthstone. You rake deeper toward the centre. There. A point of orange barely larger than a cherry stone buried under grey. Still alive. Just. You build the fire around it carefully. Kindling first, the dry sticks from the box beside the hearth, set in the crosshatch that lets air move between them, positioned close to the orange point without touching it, giving it space, giving it something to grow toward. You lower your face to the grate and blow. Long, controlled, directed at the glow. Not too strong. Too strong and you scatter the ash and lose it. Not strong enough and you waste breath. The glow brightens. A thread of smoke rises. You blow again, slightly harder. This smoke thickens and catches at its edge, and the smallest of flames appears, a flame the size of a fingernail that finds the nearest stick of kindling and takes hold. 4 minutes this morning. A fast morning. There are mornings, the very cold nights, the ones where the damper doesn't seal right and the air finds the coal before you can, when there is nothing left at 6 o'clock, nothing at all, and you have to start from the beginning with the tinder box and the char cloth and the flint. And the fire takes 20 minutes, and you start the day's work behind. You feed the young fire. First piece of coal, roughly the size of your closed fist, heavy and cold in your palm, weighing perhaps a pound. You set it at the edge of the burning kindling where it will catch from the heat without smothering the young flame. The coal sits there black and dull for a full minute before its surface begins to change, a faint orange appearing along the edges, the coal beginning its slow conversion. Coal takes longer to catch than wood and burns longer and hotter once it does. For a kitchen that needs to cook for 8 people over 12 hours, coal is what you want. For a bedroom that needs warmth through the night, coal is exactly what you want. For an attic room that has no fire at all, coal would be a gift from God. But that is not how the house is arranged, and the house is not going to rearrange itself for Sarah Fletcher from Shrewsbury, 16, bottom of the household. By the time Mrs. Hartley comes down at 6:30, her cap on, apron already tied, face composed with the expression of someone who has assessed the day's work and found it manageable, which is Mrs. Hartley's daily achievement and no small one. The fire is going properly. The first coal has caught and 2 more are on. The kettle is on its hook above the fire, beginning its slow climb to the boil. Mrs. Hartley looks at the fire. A brief professional assessment. The same glance a ship's captain gives to sails and sky. She nods. She puts the teapot on the kitchen table. This is a thing Mrs. Hartley does that no one instructed her to do, and that no one has ever thanked her for in explicit words. Every winter morning, a pot of proper tea, real tea, from the household supply, the good Canton tea that Mr. Aldgate buys because he believes in being fair with his people's mornings, if not always with their work hours, brewed and put on the table with 4 cups, 1 for each servant. The thanks exist in the drinking. You have been here 2 weeks and you already know that the tea is not optional, not really. The tea is Mrs. Hartley saying, without using words, that the morning is survivable, that cold is a condition and not a verdict, that the work will get done. You wrap your hands around the cup. The warmth moves from the pottery into your palms, up through your wrists. The cold that has been in your fingers since the floor met your feet at 5:30. The cold that has been specific and present and slightly insistent begins to retreat. Not gone, not yet, but losing its authority. You drink standing up because there is coal to carry. The coal cellar is through a hatch in the kitchen floor, a short descent into a low-ceilinged room that smells of mineral coal and the sweet dark dust that coats everything in here. The coal arrived 3 days ago. Mr. Blaine's boy tipping the 100-weight sacks through the coal hole in the pavement above, the coal rushing down in a roaring black waterfall that you could hear from the first floor. Newcastle coal, black and bright surfaced where it catches light, heavy in the hand. Good coal, the kind that burns with a blue edge to the flame when it first catches, the kind that holds its heat. You fill the scuttle. Full, the scuttle weighs roughly 40 pounds. You weigh perhaps 110. The journey is the length of the house, vertically. Basement to attic and back again, 6 times. The same stairs you descended an hour ago, now travelled in the opposite direction with the weight pulling at your arms and shoulders, the cold of the metal handle in your palm gradually warming as your grip transfers heat to it. The coal goes in order. This is the unspoken rule, never written anywhere, known by everyone. Master bedroom first. Then Mrs. Aldgate's dressing room, then the nursery, then the library, the study, the dining room, the family's rooms, the family's fires. This is not cruelty. It is the order of things, and the order of things in number 14 Sackville Street is the order of things in every house of this kind in London in January 1733. And you knew what the order was before you arrived because your mother, who had a cousin in service in Bristol, told you. You lay the fires before the family rises so that the family rises to warm rooms. The point of the early hours, the point of your particular darkness and cold, is so that their warmth will be ready when they need it. You are the mechanism that produces a warmth that, from where they stand, appears to have produced itself. This is invisible work. Agnes told you this on your 4th morning. The best service is invisible. You should be gone from the room before the family arrives in it. The fire should be burning, the coal scuttle should be full, the ashes should be removed. No evidence of the apparatus that produced this state except the state itself. You are the apparatus. You carry warmth to the people who already have it. Down to the cellar a second time. The stairs down to the coal cellar have a particular cold to them. A cold that descends, that gets colder the further down you go. As though the earth beneath London is storing something it has no intention of surrendering before April. The cellar air smells differently than the kitchen air. Less ash, more stone, the mineral dark of coal dust that coats everything in here, including the low ceiling, the rough brick walls, your apron if you press against anything. You have learned to move through the cellar without pressing against anything. You fill the scuttle by feel as much as by the dim grey light that finds its way through the coal hole above. The coal is good quality, dry, the lump solid. You can feel the difference between good coal and bad coal now. Feel it in the weight and the surface, the way a cook learns to feel bread dough. Good coal, heavy, slightly bright on the broken surfaces, the smell of something that burned once a very long time ago in an ancient forest. The coal is compressed time. You have thought about this, carrying it. Each piece of this coal was a tree, or part of a forest, 300 million years ago. The warmth that comes out of it when it burns is the warmth of those trees having grown in sunlight that no longer exists. You're carrying ancient sunlight up 6 flights of stairs to warm a merchant's house in London. Agnes said this to you once, on your 3rd week. She said it the way she says things, without ceremony, almost without interest, as if she's noting a fact about the weather. And then she picked up her broom and went back to the floors. You have thought about it since. The coal is not simply coal. The coal is alone from a world that ended. The second scuttle goes to Mrs. Aldgate's dressing room, a small room off the master bedroom where she sits at her toilette in the mornings, and where the fire is smaller than the bedroom fire and the room is correspondingly warmer, because a small room with a small fire holds its warmth better than a large room with a large fire. This is the one place in the house where the proportions accidentally work in the inhabitants' favour. Mrs. Aldgate's dressing room, warm enough in the mornings to remove one's gloves. This is the standard you're developing for warmth, whether you could remove your gloves, and by it the dressing room is the warmest room in the house that is not the kitchen. You lay the dressing room fire quietly, quickly, with the economy of someone who has done this in every room of the house, enough times to know each fireplace individually. The dressing room grate is smaller than the bedroom grate and draws slightly better, not correctly. No fireplace in this house draws correctly except the kitchen and the library, but better. The fire catches in 4 minutes. You close the door. The nursery next. 3rd floor. The children's room. You've grown fond of the nursery in the way you grow fond of rooms that are lived in rather than arranged. It shows the evidence of being actually used. A wooden horse in the corner that has been ridden hard by someone who takes riding wooden horses seriously. A collection of lead soldiers arranged on the windowsill with the deliberate positioning of a tactical mind. That would be Master Charles, who is 9 and strategic. A doll's house against the wall, 3 stories of it, Georgian miniature, the front swinging open to show rooms as correctly proportioned as number 14 itself, which is to say, probably cold in winter. Master Charles is awake when you come in this morning, sitting up in the bed with his blanket over his shoulders, reading a small book by the thin pre-dawn light, squinting, doing it with the concentrated determination of someone who has decided that the cold and the dark are conditions to be negotiated around rather than surrendered to. He is 9 and cold and reading by insufficient light at 5:30 in the morning. You lay the nursery fire. He watches you. He says, very quietly so as not to wake his sister, "What's that you're using?" Meaning the tinderbox. You show him. The flint, the steel, the char cloth. He says, "Why does it work?" You say, "The flint makes a spark when you strike it on the steel. The spark catches the char cloth because char cloth is cotton that's been burnt once before in a closed tin and it stays ready to catch a spark." He considers this with the expression of someone filing information for future use. He says, "Why is the room cold?" Room. You say, "It's cold every morning before the fire goes. The fire warms it." He says, "No, I mean why?" Father says the house is well built. Why is it cold? You look at him for a moment. The question is direct and correct, and he is asking it the way adults usually don't. Without embarrassment, without the assumption that cold in a good house is a fact you don't interrogate. You say, "These ceilings are too high. The warm air goes up and stays up where nobody is, and the chimneys are the wrong size for the grates. The warm air goes up them before it has time to warm the room." He looks at the ceiling. He looks at the chimney breast. He says, "Someone should fix that." You say, "Yes, sir." He goes back to his book. The fire catches. Miss Anne sleeps through everything. You close the door quietly. The library, the study, the dining room. Each room carries its own cold in January, the cold particular to its size and position and use. The library is the exception. The library is manageable, Agnes's word, meaning a room that can be managed into warmth with the correct coal and the correct fire. The study is not manageable in the same way, smaller than the library but with a window that faces north, and a chimney that draws badly enough that on some mornings in January the fire smokes for the first 10 minutes before the air above the flue warms enough to allow the proper draw. You have learned to open the study window 2 inches when this happens, for the 3 minutes it takes to establish the draw, then close it again, accepting a brief extreme cold in exchange for the fire's cooperation. The dining room is the coldest room in the house that is regularly used. It is on the ground floor at the back facing north, with a fireplace that has the widest flue and the least correct proportions of any fireplace in the building. When the dining room fire is going well, the room achieves a cold of perhaps 5 degrees less than the January street outside. You have measured this informally by feel, by the way your breath behaves in the room and on the street. The distinction is real but modest. On very cold January days, the dining room and the January street outside are nearly the same temperature, and Mr. Aldgate's guests eat their meals in coats. This is not mentioned. This is not a thing that is mentioned. Everyone eats in their coat, and the cold is the ambient condition that the fire has not quite successfully addressed. And no one names it as a failure because it is also everyone else's failure. Every house on the street, every house in London, the same wrong chimneys and high ceilings and draughty windows. And comfort, Mr. Aldgate once said to a guest who remarked on the chill, is a matter of constitution. And the guest, who was wearing his overcoat at the dining table, agreed with the conviction of someone who has never been warm enough in winter and has decided this makes him hardy. The master bedroom is on the 2nd floor. 2nd floor in a Georgian house means this is the understanding you've developed over 2 weeks of carrying coal to it. A room designed to be seen, to demonstrate the standing of the household through the quality of its materials and the correctness of its proportions. Turkey carpet of good quality, the colours still strong, red and blue and the border pattern in cream and gold. Mahogany wardrobe with its brass fittings, dressing table with its tilting glass, fireplace with marble surround, mantelpiece with the bracket clock and 2 Chelsea china figures and the small oval portrait. Velvet curtains around the 4-poster bed, drawn at night to create a private world inside the room's public world. The correct Georgian understanding that warmth could be generated within a bed's curtains, even if the room surrounding the bed could not be made truly warm. You enter quietly. The curtains are drawn. Mrs. Aldgate's breathing is the room's only sound. The room is cold. This is the fact that has taken you the longest to absorb fully. The master bedroom is cold in the mornings. Not as cold as the attic, not as cold as the corridor at the top of the servants' stairs, but cold in a real and present way, cold enough that the water in the washstand basin has ice on its surface some mornings, cold enough that your breath makes clouds when you first come in, cold enough that the marble surround of the fireplace, when your sleeve brushes it accidentally, communicates its chill through the fabric with the directness that marble has. The master bedroom, the turkey carpet, the velvet curtains, cold. You lay the fire as quietly as you can manage, kindling from the basket by the grate. You refilled it yesterday evening. Coal from the scuttle, placed carefully without the clatter that a careless placement produces. A clatter that carries in a cold, still room the way sounds carry in an empty church. The tinder box from the mantelpiece, the flint struck twice before the charcloth catches, the kindling taking the flame in 3 minutes this morning. By the time you close the door behind you, the fire is going, and the first radiance of warmth is beginning to change the air immediately in front of the grate. But the room beyond that immediate radius is still cold. You know this because Agnes showed you on your first week. She did it in the library where the fireplace works correctly. She told you to hold your palm toward the fire at 4 feet. Warm. Move to 6 feet. Less warm. Move to 8 feet. And this was in the library, with a good fire going well. At 8 feet from a good fire in the library, cold. The room is 20 feet long. This is what you carry up the stairs every morning in 40-pound increments. 4 feet of warmth per room. 4 feet out of 20. The rest of the room, the part where the family actually lives their lives, at the dining table, at the writing desk, at the dressing table, in the chair by the window reading a letter, is cold. Not outdoor cold, not January cold, but cold in the persistent way of a stone building in winter that no fire has quite conquered. And the coal costs 12 shillings every 2 weeks. Down to the cellar, back up with the next scuttle. The nursery is on the 3rd floor. Miss Anne is 6 and Master Charles is 9, and they sleep as children do, in the instinctive warmth-seeking arrangement that the body reaches for on cold nights. Miss Anne tucked under her brother's arm, the two of them curved together in the middle of the bed, their nightcaps slightly askew from the night's turning, both of them warm in a small and specific way. Warm where they touch each other, cold where they don't. Miss Anne has recently developed the habit of pressing her cold feet against her brother's calves in the night. Master Charles has complained about this. The complaint has not been effective. The nursery nurse is Mary, 23, from Dorset. The coastal kind of Dorset, where people are matter-of-fact about cold and damp as conditions of life. She's sitting up in her truckle bed with her blanket around her shoulders when you enter, her hair down, her expression the expression of someone who has been awake for 20 minutes in the cold, waiting for the morning to officially begin. She watches you lay the fire. When the fire catches and you pick up the scuttle, she says, "Thank you, Sarah." She doesn't say it every morning. Enough mornings. You nod and go. Down for the next load. The library, the study, the dining room. 6 trips total. 6 flights of stairs up, 6 flights down, £40 each way. By the time the last scuttle is delivered, your back has a knowledge in it that has nothing to do with thought, a knowing in the muscles and the tendons, the body's own record of what it has done this morning. In Shrewsbury you helped your mother carry water from the pump, and you helped your father shift sacks in the grain store, and you walked the distance to market and back with a full basket. You were not a person unacquainted with physical work before you came to London. But this work is different. This work has a repetition to it that your body is learning to manage, not enduring, managing, which is a different relationship to difficulty, a relationship in which you and the difficulty have reached an accommodation. By March of your first winter you can make the coal carries without thinking about them. The weight is the weight. The stairs are the stairs. Your body is the body that does this every morning and has adjusted itself accordingly. You're not the girl who arrived in December, who felt every stair and every pound, and who could not, some mornings in January, feel her hands properly by the time the last scuttle was emptied. You are the person this winter has made you, stronger in the particular way that specific physical work makes you stronger, not uniformly, not in the way that makes you feel capable of everything, but specifically, precisely, in the muscles and the habits that this work requires. You are a coal carrier, you're a fire lighter, you're the person who finds the ember at the centre of the mound. By the time the last scuttle is delivered and the last fire laid, your shoulders carry the specific burn of muscles that have been working at capacity in the cold, and your hands have gone from numb to aching to something beyond aching that you've started to recognise as the particular toll of this work in January. the skin tightening across your knuckles, the fingers wanting to curl toward warmth when there is none to curl toward. You come back to the kitchen. You wash your hands in the basin. Cold water, slightly brown from the pump yesterday. The water itself only slightly less cold than the stone walls it came through. You dry them on the cloth by the basin. There is a thin line across the first knuckle of your right index finger that was not there last week. Agnes comes in from the servants' stairs, carrying the morning's chamber pots, with the focused attention of someone doing a task that requires a certain removal of the mind from the task. She sets them down, washes her hands with more water, dries them, and looks at yours. She says, "Give me your hands, you hold them out." She studies the knuckle line. She says nothing about it, but she reaches into her apron pocket and produces a small ceramic pot with a wax seal across the lid, which she sets on the table in front of you. She says, "Every night before you sleep, not only the ones that hurt already, both hands, the whole surface, you say, 'Thank you.'" She says, "There's nothing to thank me for. It's cheaper to prevent than to mend." She takes the chamber pots back out. The pot smells of lanolin and something herbal, rosemary or lavender, whatever the apothecary on St. Martin's Lane was adding for pleasantness that week. You put it in your apron pocket. For the rest of the day it is there, a small weight against your hip, a small warmth from your body, the warmth you provide to everything you carry. The morning's first major work is the ashes. Each fire that was laid and burned since yesterday evening has produced ash that must be removed before the next laying. Not all of it. The good grey ash at the base can stay as insulation for the grate, but the spent coal and the heavy clinker must come out, and coming out means the ash bucket and the care not to raise a cloud of fine black dust in a clean room. This is the work that marks you when you are done with it. The coal dust on your hands and forearms, the grey smudge on your apron, the particular smell of cold ash that clings to your hair and follows you through the house. In the dining room on your way out with the ash bucket, you pass the window. You do not plan to stop. The bucket is heavy and slightly warm from the ash, and the ash smell is already in your nose, and you are thinking about the kitchen scullery and the next task. But you stop. The window in the dining room faces south toward the rear of the property, which means it faces away from the street, which means the light that comes through it in the morning is indirect, reflected light, the thin winter light that has bounced off rooftops and walls before it finds its way here. Through the glass you can see the rear of the houses on the next street, the tops of the garden walls, the grey January sky. You put your free hand on the window frame, the painted wood of the sash. You feel it immediately. Cold air moving over your palm. Steady. Continuous. Too consistent to be a draught. Too persistent to be accidental. This is cold air finding the gap between the sash and the box frame and coming through. The gap is necessary. The sash must be able to slide up and down, and the mechanism that allows sliding requires clearance, and clearance means a gap, and a gap in January means the outside is not entirely outside. You move your palm along the frame. The cold is everywhere the wood meets the wood. The window is 4 feet wide and 5 feet tall. The gap runs around the whole perimeter. You cannot see it clearly, but you can feel it. Cold moving over your palm, patient and constant, the outside coming in. You take your hand away. You carry the ash downstairs. Agnes has been in this house for 9 years. You have not asked her directly why she stayed 9 years. The question seems too large, too much like pressing on something that might have more in it than the pressing should release. but you have gathered pieces of it the way you gather pieces of everything Agnes tells you, in passing, in the moments when the work creates the right kind of proximity, and she says a thing while her hands are doing something else. She stayed because the house is regular. The work is the same work every day, and it is hard work, but it is not uncertain. Her wages arrive on the quarter day. Mrs. Hartley is fair. The previous girl before you was there 4 years, and left to marry a glover's apprentice in Holborn, and Agnes said, "Good for her," and meant it, without apparent regret that the knowledge she'd passed along had left with the person she'd passed it to. She will tell you what she knows. This is what she has decided about you in the first month, that you are worth telling. She says, there are 2 kinds of things to know in a house, the work and the house itself. The work you learn by doing it until you stop making errors. The house you learn by paying attention to things that are not your immediate concern. She says, this house. You need to understand it, or winter will wear you out in ways that are unnecessary. Not unavoidable. Unavoidable cold is unavoidable. But there is cold that happens because the building works against you, and that cold you can mitigate if you know where it comes from. She teaches you the windows first because the windows are the thing you can act on, then the ceilings, then the chimneys, which she explains with the patience of someone who has explained something several times before and has learned to break it into pieces rather than presenting it whole. She says, here is the thing about fire that most people don't know, because most people use fire without thinking about how fire works. Fire needs air. You know this. You know if you smother a fire it goes out. Fire burns by taking oxygen from the air around it and combining it with the coal and producing heat and gases. The gases have to go somewhere. They go up the flue. She says, when the gases go up the flue, they take room air with them. That room air has to be replaced. Where does the replacement air come from? Outside. Through every gap the house has. The window frames, the door frames, the floor gaps, the place where the coving meets the cornice. She says, the fire is a pump. It pumps the room's warm air up and out, and it pumps cold air in from outside to replace it. The better the fire burns, the harder it pumps, the more cold air comes in. On a very cold day with a very good fire, the cold air coming in through the window frame and the door gap can be almost as much cold as the fire is making warm. You say, so the fire makes the room colder. She says the fire makes the room colder than it would be if the room was sealed, and you just let the walls slowly warm it from a fire that wasn't drawing. But a sealed room with a fire going would kill you. No oxygen. So you have to have the drawer, and the drawer brings cold, and the fireplace was supposed to be built to manage the drawer correctly, and in most rooms of this house it was not. You say the library. She says the library is the exception. Go and stand in the library when the fire's going. Stand at 6 feet and tell me what you feel. You do this later that morning. You stand in the library with the fire burning well, and you hold your palm out at 6 feet from the grate. Warm. Not 4 feet warm. 6 feet warm. Real warmth. The warmth of a room that the fire has actually managed to reach beyond its immediate circle. The warmth of a correctly proportioned hearth, giving heat to the room it inhabits rather than mostly sending it up and out. You stand there for a full minute in the library warmth. You understand now why Mr. Aldgate keeps his late hours in here, why Agnes dusts the library last, taking longer than strictly necessary, why even William, who maintains indifference to cold as a matter of personal dignity, sometimes invents reasons to pass through the library when the fire is going. The library is a proof. The library is what the house should be. Agnes says, when you come back to tell her, Now you know what right looks like. Everything else in the house is wrong relative to that. She says, knowing what right looks like makes the wrong things more bearable. Not less cold, but more bearable. You know it's the building, not you. Agnes explains the building over 3 weeks. A week at a time, a piece at a time. The way someone gives you a complicated piece of information when they know you will only hold a part of it on any given day and need to come back for the rest. She doesn't sit you down and give you a lecture. She tells you things while you're doing things, while your hands are occupied, while your attention is partly elsewhere, as if the information goes in better when the body's busy. The first week, the windows. You already know about the gap. She shows you what the gap means. On a still day, the cold seeps in quietly, and you might not notice until you've been in the room for an hour and realised you are colder than you should be. On a windy day, any day when the wind comes from the north and finds Sackville Street at any kind of angle, the cold pours in, and no fire in the room can keep ahead of it. The window and the fire are in constant negotiation, and in January the window has more resources. She says, feel the wall. You put your hand flat on the interior wall of the library, the one facing the street. The plaster is cold, not room temperature cold, which would be the temperature of the air in the room itself. Colder than that. The cold of the stone behind the plaster, the stone that has been absorbing outdoor cold since October and is now a foot-thick reservoir of winter pressed against the interior of every room. She says, the walls hold cold the way they hold warmth. Better, actually. Because cold lasts longer. You heat the wall with a fire and by morning it is cold again. But the cold the wall absorbed in November is still there in February. The wall is colder than the air in the room, and it is cooling the air in the room continuously from the sides. She says, now look at the ceiling, the library ceiling, 12 feet high. The correct Georgian height for a room this size, the height that signals without words that the people who live here have enough money that they do not need to worry about cubic feet of air to be heated. The correct height for looks, the wrong height for warmth. She says, warm air rises. You know this. You know this. She says, warm air rises, and in a room with a 12-foot ceiling it goes to the top, fills the upper 4 feet. That's where the warmth is. Up there, near the cornice, near the plaster, up where nobody sits, up where nobody stands, up where the warmth is absolutely no use to anyone. The lower 8 feet, where the furniture is, where the people are, those are the coldest 8 feet. You look at the library ceiling, 12 feet of plaster and lime, warm air pooling somewhere up there, useless, she says, and the chimneys. This takes the longest to understand because it seems wrong, but once you understand it, you see it everywhere. See it in the behaviour of every fire in every room. See it in the way the family sits closer and closer to the fire as the evening progresses, and the room cools around them, and the fire can no longer maintain even its 4-foot radius. A fire breathes. It takes air from the room to sustain its combustion, and sends the warmed air up the flue and out. The air it pulls up the flue must be replaced, so the room draws in outside air through every gap it can find. The window frames, the door frames, the cracks in the floor, the place where the coving meets the wall. The fire is not just heating the room, it is running a continuous import operation, pulling cold air in from outside to replace the warm air it is sending up the chimney. She says, the better the fire burns, the harder it draws, the more cold air it pulls in. You say, so the fire is the biggest source of cold in the room it heats. She says, now you understand the house. she says, and the flues here are too wide. Most of them. The flue should be matched to the size of the grate. There is a correct proportion, a size of throat that controls the drawer without strangling the fire. Too large a throat and the drawer is too strong. The warm air goes up before it has time to warm the room. The fire burns fast and bright and expensive, and the coal disappears and the room stays cold. Too small and the fire smokes. The right size, the correct mathematics. Most of the builders who built these houses in the last 50 years never learned it. She straightens up. She's been bending to look at the grate while she talked. She says, the library fireplace is the right size. That's why this room is the only room that properly warms. Whoever built this house built 1 fireplace correctly and 5 incorrectly. You say, did anyone tell Mr. Aldgate? She says, he knows. He had a man look at it 2 winters ago. The man told him it would cost more to rebuild the flues than to simply buy more coal, so he buys more coal. She goes back to making the beds, and this is how the house works. This is the system you carry coal through every morning, the system you are the lowest visible part of. A house designed to be beautiful, built with the proportions that signal wealth and taste, and a certain disregard for the practical, and then stuffed with coal fires trying to compensate for what the architecture refuses to provide. The windows let in cold air. The walls hold cold and give it back. The ceilings collect the warmth at a height no body reaches. The chimneys pull the warm air up before it has time to stay. And the coal merchant comes every 2 weeks with 800 more pounds of coal. Someone profits from this. The coal merchant profits. The architect who designed the proportions doesn't live here in January. The builder who got the flues wrong has been paid and moved on. The cold and the coal are yours. Provisions. Mrs. Hartley's afternoon errand, assigned to you because you are the youngest and the fastest, and because the market vendors, who've learned to read the household's needs, are less likely to cheat a girl who looks young than one who looks experienced. 2:30 on a Wednesday, the 3rd week of January. You put on your cloak, the good wool one thick enough to matter, and you come up the area steps to the street. The cold finds your ears in approximately 3 seconds. January in Sackville Street. The thin light lying flat across the façades. Shadows of the railings precise and long on the pavement stones. The air smells of coal smoke and horse, and the compressed output of a city that has been burning coal and generating warmth all morning. All the warmth of that burning now mingled in the air above the street, in a way that makes the street smell like work, like the inside of a kitchen, like proximity to effort. It is warmer than the house. Every morning you come up the area steps for some errand or another, and every morning the street is warmer than what you just left. Not summer warm, not warm like standing in front of the kitchen fire, but warmer than the corridors and the stairs and the rooms where 6 fires burn and fail to warm the rooms they burn in. You have stopped being surprised by this, but you have not stopped noticing it, because it demands to be noticed. Today you stand on the pavement for a moment longer than the errand requires. The street's warmth is everywhere and nowhere in particular. It comes from the body of the horse hitched to the post outside number 8, a bay horse, standing with the patient resignation of its kind, its flanks steaming slightly in the cold air, radiating the warmth of a large animal's metabolism into the space within 2 feet of its side. It comes from the baker's shop 2 doors from the corner, whose ovens have been going since 4 in the morning, and whose window is still slightly fogged from the last batch. A warmth coming out every time the shop door opens that hits your face like something friendly. It comes from the sedan chair being carried past by 2 men in matching livery, who are working hard enough that they show no sign of cold, their breath coming in quick white puffs, their faces flushed from the effort. It comes from the coffee house on the corner, where the door opens every few minutes to release a billow of warmed air, the concentrated warmth of a room full of men who've been sitting in it for hours, drinking coffee and smoking pipes, all of them together producing heat the way any dense collection of living things produces heat. The street has no coal, no fireplace, no fire, and it is warmer than number 14 Sackville Street with its 6 burning grates. You turn onto Piccadilly. Piccadilly in January at 2:30 is the city performing its daily work of commerce and movement. Both sides of the road occupied. Coaches and carts on the carriageway, pedestrians on the raised footpaths where the pavement is elevated above the street level. The separation between foot traffic and wheel traffic imperfect but better than nothing. A woman selling apples from a basket. Winter apples, slightly soft, stored since autumn, but still selling at a penny for 3 because January has no better apples to offer. A man with a barrow of coal dust, the cheap compressed grade for people who cannot afford the good Newcastle coal, the coal dust that burns faster and gives less heat but costs less. And that is what the calculation produces for people at the lower end of the calculation. You do Mrs. Hartley's shopping. The eggs are good this week. You hold 4 up against the thin light to assess them. The vendor watching with the tolerant expression of someone who has been assessed like this before. The sage, the salt cod, the onions, acceptable, not fine. January onions are what they are. The cheese. The vendor wants 3p for a piece you assess at 2p. You say so. He says this particular cheese comes from a very particular farm. You say you're sure it does, and you'll take it for 2p halfpenny. He considers this with the professional expression of someone who has done this calculation before and knows where it ends and says, done. You stand after the transaction with your basket, longer than necessary, because the market in January is warm in the way markets are warm. The warmth of people pressed together buying and selling, the warmth of breath and bodies, and the collective effort of commerce. And you do not want to go back yet. You've noticed that you extend every errand, every provision run, every trip outside the house, by exactly as long as you can justify without attracting comment from Mrs. Hartley. You have not quite admitted to yourself why you do this. The cold in the house and the relative warmth of the street are in a negotiation with your sense of duty, and the street is winning by a small margin most afternoons. You turn and walk back towards Sackville Street. But first you stop at the corner for one more moment. The coffee house. The door opens and a man comes out. A prosperous man, a merchant by the look of him, his coat good quality, his wig carefully powdered, his face the face of someone who has been comfortable for the last 2 hours and is now stepping back into January with the momentary bracing expression of someone who knows it will be cold and has decided this is an acceptable exchange for the coffee and the company and the reading of the newspapers. He steps out, the warm air from inside pushing past him into the street, and he pulls his coat tighter once, twice, and then his body adjusts and he walks on. The warm air that came out the door of the coffee house finds you where you're standing. It is warmer than anything you have felt since this morning's kitchen. Not the morning's kitchen, warmer than that. The kitchen in the mornings is the warmth of a fire in a room that has been cold all night. A warmth that is still partly cold, still partly the memory of the night before. This warmth is different. The warmth of a room that has been inhabited for hours by many people. A warmth built up and maintained by the collective output of bodies and hot drinks and the fires the coffee house keeps burning from 5 in the morning until midnight. A warmth so thoroughly established that it has overfilled the room and is now spilling out the door. It lasts 2 seconds. The door closes. The cold returns. You walk back towards Sackville Street with the ghost of the coffee house warmth on your face. You think, the coffee house is what this house should be, not in appearance. You're not imagining the master bedroom arranged like a coffee house with a long table and a dozen men reading newspapers. But in function, the coffee house is warm because it does what it does correctly. It concentrates life and fire in a correctly proportioned space, and it produces warmth as a natural result. The house attempts to concentrate warmth in rooms that resist warmth, through fireplaces that fight themselves, in spaces designed for appearance rather than heat. The result is that the coffee house, which exists for the purpose of being in, of sitting and talking and warming yourself with company, is warmer than the house that exists for the purpose of living and sleeping and surviving winter. The coffee house is honest. The house is aspirational. Mrs. Hartley will be waiting. You've been out 20 minutes longer than a provision run for eggs and sage should take, which is 5 minutes over what you can defend as accidental, and 15 minutes over what you can defend at all. You walk faster. At the corner of Sackville Street, you pass a girl about your age coming in the opposite direction, carrying a basket not unlike yours, with the particular expression of someone doing an errand they are glad of doing, because it means they are outside in the street rather than inside in the house. You recognize the expression because you've been wearing it all afternoon. You don't know her. She doesn't know you. You nod at each other. She nods back. Both of you. Outside, in the cold, in the street that is warmer than the house, prolonging the return as long as you can manage. You go in. The coal merchant. Thomas Blaine, Thomas to his family, Mr. Blaine to his customers, the coal merchant to the whole of the neighbourhood, comes every alternate Tuesday, driving a heavy cart with 2 horses because the weight requires 2 horses, and the horses are, in his own assessment, the most important things he owns, and he treats them accordingly. He is a stout, red-faced man of 50 or so with a coat that has been patched so many times. The original coat is now purely theoretical, wearing boots that have seen extraordinary service, smelling of coal in a way that is not unpleasant because the smell of coal is the smell of warmth. Before warmth, the stored promise of heat. He delivers through the coal hole in the pavement. You lift the small round iron lid, you stand back, and he tips the sacks one at a time through the opening, the coal rushing down the chute into the cellar below with a sustained roar and a cloud of black dust that rises through the opening and disperses in the cold air. Each sack takes 30 seconds to empty. For this delivery, 8 sacks, £800. The sound of each one is the house saying, "We are provisioned for another 2 weeks." You stand at the top of the area steps watching the operation, counting. Mr. Blaine's boy handles the sacks with the economy of someone who has done this 10 times before 10, and will do it 10 times after 10. Mr. Blaine himself guides the process from the cart, checking each sack, watching the coal go down. When the 5th sack is done, he glances up at you. He says, "You're the new girl." You say, 2 weeks now, sir." He says, "How are you finding it?" "The house." You say, without meaning to say quite this much, "The house doesn't get warm, sir." "Not the way I expected." He looks at you with the expression of someone who has heard this before from people in houses exactly like this one, and has thoughts about it. He says, "Come down here a moment." You come down the area, steps to the pavement. He says, "Feel this." He hands you a piece of coal from the bag. The good grade, black and bright surfaced, a good solid piece. You hold it in your palm. It is cold, the way anything that has been outside in January is cold. He says, "That's your warmth for the next 2 weeks." He says, "The problem with your house," and I say your house, I've delivered to it 6 years, "isn't the coal. The coal is fine. The problem is the flues." He takes the coal back from you. He says, "A fire breathes. It draws air up the flue and sends the warm air out of the room with it. More draw means more cold air coming in to replace the warm air going out. The flue has to be the right size for the grate. There is a mathematics to it, and it is not complicated. But most builders don't do the calculation because doing it requires knowing things that aren't fashionable knowledge. Too big a flue and the draw is too strong. The fire burns bright. The warm air goes up before it can warm the room. The cold comes in from every gap to replace it." He says, "In your house, the master bedroom, the library, the study, all of them too large in the flue for the grate size. The only one right is the kitchen fireplace, which is why the kitchen is the only room in the house that actually warms up. Someone who knew what they were doing built that one. The others were built to look right." He gestures at number 14, the beautiful façade, the symmetrical windows, the lion head knocker. He says, "Beautiful house, wrong chimneys." He climbs back on the cart and says something to his boy, and they move on to the next address. You stand on the pavement for a moment in the January air, which is warmer than the house, looking at number 14. Beautiful house, wrong chimneys. You go inside. Mrs. Aldgate falls ill on a Sunday in the 4th week of January, and the illness teaches you more about the house's cold than anything else has. She doesn't come down to supper. Agnes mentions this to Mrs. Hartley in the kitchen, low-voiced. The mention that means, "Note this, but don't escalate." By Monday morning she's still not at breakfast, and Mr. Aldgate eats alone in the dining room with the particular careful composure of a man who is managing his concern by not discussing it, which is a kind of composure that requires effort you can see from a distance. The doctor comes at 10:30. Dr. Forsyth. Small, precise, a good wig, a leather case carried with the manner of someone who expects his knowledge to be respected and usually finds that it is. He goes upstairs. He's there for an hour. He comes down and speaks with Mr. Aldgate in the library. The door closed for 15 minutes. Then Mr. Aldgate comes to find you. He says, the doctor has given instructions. The master bedroom fire is to be lit 3 times each day, before dawn, at noon, and at 6 in the evening. Full coal each time, not the normal amount. And there is a problem with the window frame. The doctor noticed a draft. He wants the frame sealed with rags. Can you do this? You say, yes, sir, I can do this today. He says, before anything else. He says, and the fire through the night. If it needs coal at 2 in the morning, put coal on it. Is that clear? You say, yes, sir. He looks at you. He's not a man who looks directly at you much, not unkindly, not with any particular intention, simply with the habitual remove that most men of his position maintain with the people at the bottom of their households. But this morning he looks at you. He says, thank you, Sarah. He goes upstairs. You find Agnes and ask about the rags. She goes to the linen press and produces strips of old cloth, worn-out table napkins, an apron beyond mending, and hands you a bundle. She says nothing. The look she gives you says, go and do this right. You go upstairs. The master bedroom door is open. Inside, Mrs. Aldgate in the bed, propped on pillows, her face pale with the particular pallor of illness, a pallor that is different from cold pale. Not the paleness of someone whose warmth has been taken away, but the paleness of someone whose warmth is fighting for itself from the inside. The doctor is at the window. He's running his finger along the gap in the sash frame with the concentrated attention of a man finding what he expected to find. He turns when you enter. He says, "You lay the fires in this room." You say, "Yes, sir." He says, "You carry the coal for the whole house?" You say, "Yes, sir. Every morning." He looks at you with his quick, dark appraisal eyes for a moment. He says, "This window is pouring cold air into this room all night. Your fires cannot warm a room that has the January air running through its window frame from November to April. I need every gap you can find sealed, every crack. Not just along the bottom, everywhere. Do you understand?" You say, "Yes, sir." He says, "Do it properly, not quickly. Properly." He picks up his bag. He speaks to Mrs. Aldgate, something low and reassuring that you don't catch, and leaves. In the doorway he pauses and turns back. He says, "You've been in service here how long?" You say, 6 weeks now, sir." He says, "And the fires, you're the one laying them, every morning." You say, "Yes, sir. 6 fires every morning." He says, "The master bedroom fire. How long does it take to warm this room when you've laid it?" You say, "An hour before the air near the fire is warm, sir. 2 hours before you'd say the room had changed temperature. 3 hours before it would warm someone standing at the window." He looks at you with a quick measuring look again. He says, 3 hours to warm a bedroom in January. You say, "With the windows unsealed and the flue pulling hard, sir. That's what I've observed." He says, "And you observe this how?" You say, "I carry coal through all the rooms every morning, sir. I feel the difference room to room, and I feel how the rooms change through the day. The library is warmer by 10 o'clock than the master bedroom is by noon." He says, "The library fireplace is different from the others." You say, "Yes, sir, better proportioned." He is quiet for a moment. He says, "When you seal this window, do it properly, every gap. The room will take 2 hours to warm rather than 3. That's what she needs." He leaves. You kneel at the window and begin. It occurs to you, working the linen strips into the gap with your flat stick, that the doctor understood what you told him, that he took the information about the rooms and the fires and the windows and processed it into a medical recommendation. Seal the window, 3 fires a day, and the room will warm. He treated the room the way he would treat a patient, identified the problem, recommended the intervention. The house is a kind of patient in this understanding. The house is sick with wrong chimneys and draughty windows and ceilings too high for practical warmth. Dr. Forsyth cannot cure the house, but he can prescribe the best available palliative. Seal the gaps, add coal, be patient. You press the last strip of linen into the last gap above the top sash. The window is sealed. The room is not warm yet. It won't be warm for hours. But the cold air is no longer coming through freely. The fire can now try. You kneel at the window with your bundle of strips and begin. The gap around the sash frame is the first priority. You take a strip of linen, fold it twice, and press it into the gap between the sliding sash and the box frame with your flat stick, working it in firmly until the wood holds it. You move along the full length of the sash, folding and pressing, then the same on the opposite side, then the top, which requires standing on the coal scuttle to reach, then the gap between the box frame and the surrounding wall, which requires thinner strips and more pressure because the gap here is uneven. wider in some places, narrower in others, the irregular gap of original construction rather than anything designed. It takes 25 minutes. Mrs. Aldgate watches your hands from the bed. She says, "Does that actually help?" You say, "It stops the cold air coming through, ma'am. The room will hold the heat better with the gap sealed." She's quiet for a moment. Then she says, "Is it like this everywhere? The windows?" You say, "All the sash windows, ma'am. The gap is necessary for the sash to slide." She says, "And my room has been cold all winter because of that gap, while the fire burned." You say, "Yes, ma'am. The fire gives warmth, and the window takes it back." She says, "What about your room, the attic?" You say, "The same gap, ma'am." "I stuffed mine 2 weeks ago after Agnes showed me why." She looks at you. The look lasts longer than the conversation requires, and you understand that she is thinking something through, tracking something back that she has not tracked before. She says, "Does your room have a fire?" You say, "No, ma'am." She's quiet for a long time. Outside, Sackville Street continues. A carriage passing. Voices. She says, "You may go. You go." You're at the end of the hall turning for the stairs before you register what happened. She asked about your room. She didn't have to ask. It wasn't what she was asking about. Wasn't the point of the conversation. Wasn't her concern in any material sense. She just asked. You hold that for several days. The way you hold on to small warmths in cold places. Mrs. Aldgate's illness lasts 3 weeks, and the second week is serious. 2 nights during that week, Agnes comes down to the kitchen at midnight for the coal you've left there at 9 o'clock for the night fire, and she tells you quietly, standing in the warm circle of the kitchen fire, both of you in our night things, her face carrying something careful, that the doctor has been again, that the progress is slower than he'd like, that there is some concern about the chest. You lie in your cold attic room on those nights and listen to the house. The house at midnight is a different building from the house at noon. The family's world has gone quiet. The servant's world is quiet. The sounds that are left are the building sounds, the tick of the bracket clock on the second floor, a mouse in the wainscoting, the creak of a timber contracting in the cold as the night progresses, and underneath all of it, the cold itself, not audible exactly, but present in the quality of the silence, the cold that has been accumulating in the walls since October, the cold in the stone flags of every floor, and the plaster of every ceiling and the wood of every window frame. 2 floors below in the master bedroom, the fire you fed at 9 o'clock is burning now. Burning and drawing, warm air up the flue, cold air in through every remaining gap, trying to warm a woman who is ill in a room that was designed by its height and its windows and its chimney proportions to be beautiful rather than warm. A coal fire and 12 shillings a fortnight, and the building fighting every BTU of it. She recovers. The doctor is cautious for a full week after the crisis. Cautious in the way that means he was more worried than he showed, and then he is satisfied, and then it is the second week of February and she is downstairs wrapped in shawls, sitting close to the parlour fire with a cup of something warm, her colour coming back by degrees. You pass her in the hallway carrying the ash bucket from the parlour on a Tuesday afternoon. She's coming from the parlour with a shawl around her shoulders. She says, "Sarah." You stop. She says, "The rags in the window, did they help?" You say, "The doctor said the room improved, ma'am, and I think the fire does hold better when the frame is sealed. The cold comes in less fast." She says, "And your room? You said you sealed yours too." You say, "Yes, ma'am." After Agnes explained the gap to me in my first weeks, she says, Is your room cold now? Still? You say, yes, ma'am. Cold without a fire is cold even with the gaps stuffed, but less cold than it was. She's quiet for a moment. The same look as before, the look that is tracking something. She says, you may go. You go. At the bottom of the stairs, heading for the kitchen, you think, she keeps asking about my room. You don't know what it means. Maybe nothing. Maybe a woman who has just been ill and cold and has been thinking about cold in a new way, thinking about the house in a new way, is simply following the thought wherever it leads. Maybe it means something else. You don't know. You hold it anyway. February. Your hands are the monthly record of the winter. The line across your right index finger has a companion by the first week of February. The middle finger, the same knuckle, the same fine split in the skin where the cold and the water and the coal dust have found each other. Agnes's lanolin pot, which she produced without comment in January, is finished by the middle of the second week of February. She produces another one, without comment, without waiting to be asked, simply putting it on the table in front of you one morning, while you're both in the kitchen. You say, I'll pay you back when I can. She says, you can't afford to. I know what your wage is. You say, then I'll remember it. She says, the right way to return something you can't repay is to pass it on. You'll be in service long enough that someone younger will need what you know. Tell them. That's how it works. You think about this over several days. You think about Agnes's 9 years in this house, 9 years in this cold building, 9 winters of early mornings and coal carrying and frozen fingers and the lanolin pot that somebody probably gave her in her own second month. 9 years of this becoming ordinary, this becoming the texture of the days. 9 years from now, you will be 25. You will know this house the way you know your own hands. The thought is not entirely comfortable. But it is not uncomfortable in the way it would have been in December, when the house was still enormous and strange, and the cold was still something that was happening to you rather than something you were inside of. In December, 9 years would have been a sentence. In February, 9 years is simply a large number of mornings, and mornings are things you already know how to do. William breaks in the second week of February. William is the footman, 20, from somewhere north of Ipswich. A cheerful young man whose work involves opening the front door and running errands and laying the dining room table with the precision that Mr. Aldgate expects, and who has spent the winter maintaining against all physical evidence the position that he is not cold. William is not cold because William is 20, and from somewhere north of Ipswich, and because showing cold is, in his understanding, a form of weakness. He carries himself through the house in his footman's livery, good coat, but not a winter coat, livery being about appearance, not warmth, with the bearing of someone for whom temperature is a choice one doesn't make. On the second Tuesday of February you're coming up the back stairs with a coal scuttle, and he is coming down the main stairs having laid the dining room table, and you pass at the baize door, and you notice he's wearing a second coat. Under his livery coat, a plain brown wool coat that doesn't match anything else he's wearing, the collar sticking up under the livery collar in a way that is not precisely smart. You say, you have a coat on. He says, I have always had a coat on. You say, not that one. He says nothing. You say, it's a good idea. He looks at you with the expression of someone being offered dignity they have not previously accepted and are now considering. He says, yes. Well, it's cold. He goes through the baize door. You carry the coal upstairs. You think about William and the coat. William is not a bad footman. He does his work well. The table laid precisely, the front door opened at exactly the right moment. the family's needs anticipated in the careful way that good domestic service requires. He has been here 3 years. He knows the house as well as Agnes, in the practical sense, in the sense of knowing which floorboards creak and which doors catch, and what time Mr. Aldgate tends to want his afternoon fire built up. He knows these things as surely as he knows his own name, but he doesn't know the cold the way Agnes knows it. Or rather, he knows it, but he's been refusing to say he knows it, which is a different thing, which is the thing that has been keeping him cold. The second coat changes this. Once the second coat is on, once William has admitted, silently, without words, in the vocabulary of action rather than statement, that the cold is a condition he needs to address rather than deny, everything about his relationship to the house shifts slightly. He stops standing near the library door for no apparent reason and starts standing inside the library because the library is warm. He stops pretending he doesn't know where the coal scuttle in the study is and starts managing the study fire on evenings when the family is out and the fire can be built up for the room rather than for appearance. He starts, in small ways, making himself warm. Agnes notices this in March and says, to no one in particular in the kitchen, William has become sensible. Mrs. Hartley says, there it is. William, who is in the corridor and can hear this through the baize door, says nothing. His second coat is on. He says nothing, and he is wearing the second coat, and this is the only comment he's going to make on the subject. You carry the coal upstairs, the library, on a Thursday evening. Mr. Aldgate keeps his accounts on Thursdays. The ledgers spread on the reading table, the candles burning down to their sockets by 11 o'clock, the library fire going properly because the library fire always goes properly, the one room in the house where the proportions are right and the warmth is real. The Thursday coal, Agnes has taught you, needs replenishing at 9 o'clock because Mr. Aldgate will be there until 11 and the fire should be substantial through the whole of that time. You come up at 9 with the scuttle and knock and he says to come in. He's at the table with his ledger, his pen moving. The library is warm. Actually warm, not the grudging partial warmth of the other rooms, not the warmth that exists only in the immediate neighbourhood of the grate, but the warmth of a room that has been heated by a correctly proportioned fireplace for 3 hours and has actually accumulated it. You can feel the difference the moment you come through the door. The air is different here. You go to the fireplace and add coal, Mr. Aldgate says without looking up. Sarah? You say, sir. He says, I spoke to a man this week, an architect, fellow from Edinburgh working in Marylebone. He made some observations about this house. He continues writing. He says, he told me that the fireplaces, most of them in this house, are built with the wrong proportions. The flue is too large for the grate, the drawer too strong. The warm air goes up before it has time to warm the room. He said there is a correct mathematics for these things, a proper relationship between the size of the grate and the width of the throat and the height of the flue. He says if you get this right, you can heat a room twice the size with half the coal. He puts down his pen. He picks it up again. He says, you've thought about this. The house and the cold. It is not quite a question. You say, yes, sir. Mr. Blaine told me about the drawer. Agnes explained the walls and the windows and the ceiling height. I've been thinking about it since my second week. He looks up at that. He says, what is your conclusion? You're not accustomed to being asked for conclusions by Mr. Aldgate. You're not accustomed to being asked for conclusions by anyone in this house. You say, the house spends the coal fighting the building, sir. The chimneys pull the warm air out before it warms the room. The windows let the cold in. The walls hold the cold from outside and give it back to the inside. The fire can't win against all three of those things at once. He looks at you for a moment that lasts 2 seconds, or perhaps 4. He says, "That's almost exactly what the Edinburgh man said." He goes back to his ledger. He says, "Expensive to fix. The flues." He says the throat would need to be rebuilt. A smaller opening, better proportion to the grate size. Marble out, new dimensions in. Cost more than a year's coal for each fireplace. A pause. The scratch of the pen. He says, "So for now, more coal." He does not look up again. You take the empty scuttle and leave. But something has changed, small and undramatic. Something about the conversation being had at all, about the problem being named properly rather than being simply endured. The architect from Edinburgh has done the mathematics. Mr. Aldgate knows what it would cost to fix it. The coal merchant knows what the wrong chimneys cost in fuel. Agnes knows why the walls are cold. You know why the window is warm. The problem has a proper shape now, and somewhere in this architect's drawings, in the work of other people you don't know yet and may never know, someone is working toward the answer. Someone is going to get the mathematics right, and the buildings will change, and the houses will be warm in the way they were supposed to be warm, and the coal will do what it was supposed to do. Not soon. Not this winter. Maybe not in any winter you will live in this house. But someone is working on it. The Frost Fair. In the middle of February, the Thames freezes. Agnes tells you at breakfast on a Wednesday, in the way she tells you things that are not quite news, because they are things that have happened before and will happen again. The river froze last night. She says it as though this is a thing that requires noting but not excitement. But the kitchen maid from number 12, whom you know slightly from the pump, is wild with it when you see her at the market that afternoon. She says, "Have you been down? Sarah, you have to go down. They've already got a spit on the ice. There's a printer setting up a press. They're roasting an ox, on the Thames." Mrs. Hartley gives you a Sunday afternoon when the second week of the frost holds. She says it in the way she says things that are technically the granting of liberty, but are accompanied by the weight of its brevity. 2 o'clock to 6. Be back for supper. You go down to the river. The descent to the Thames from Piccadilly takes you south, through streets you have not walked before, through the maze of alleys between the larger roads, the streets narrowing as you approach the water, the buildings older and more compressed, the smell of the river finding you 2 streets away. The winter river smell, different from what you've been told the summer river smell is. This one is mineral and cold and clean in the way that only frozen water is clean. The smell of something that has stopped moving and hardened. And then you see it. Not the river, not at first. What you see first is people. An impossible number of people, all moving in the same direction, all with a quality of excitement that differs from the usual London crowd quality of purpose. This is a crowd going somewhere for the pure fact of going there, for the novelty of the thing that is there. You join the crowd and let it carry you. The descent to the ice is via a series of stairs cut into the river bank. Wooden stairs, hastily built, the timber still smelling of newness, the enterprising man who built them collecting a halfpenny per head to descend. You pay your halfpenny and go down. The ice. You step off the last stair and your foot finds it, and the first thing is the sound your boot makes on the ice. A hard, clear sound, not the sound of wood or stone or packed earth, a sound that belongs to cold itself, to water stopped in its motion and turned to something you can stand on. You take 3 steps onto the ice and stop. The Thames is frozen as far as you can see in both directions. Not just a thin glaze at the margins, solid ice, thick ice. Ice that has been tested by the weight of an ox and the crowd of people standing round it and found sufficient. The ice is white at the surface, slightly rough where wind has textured it, smoother in the sheltered areas near the banks where the freeze was quieter. And on the ice, a city. Not a proper city, a temporary one, a few hours old and a few days old in different parts, thrown together with the particular ingenuity of Londoners who encounter an unusual situation and immediately begin converting it into commerce. There are stalls, real stalls, trestle tables covered with goods, set up as though this were a market street rather than the surface of the river. There is a printer, a man who has actually brought a hand press onto the ice and is printing commemorative broadsheets that say, "Printed on the Thames, February 1733, which he's selling for a penny. There is a barber performing his trade on the ice, a man in a chair on the Thames getting a shave. There is a skittle alley. There are 3 bonfires, small controlled fires built directly on the ice, which seems to you like it should be impossible but is apparently not. The ice being thick enough to survive the heat through a layer of sand the fire builders laid between fire and ice. And there is the ox. The ox is on a spit over a very large bonfire at the centre of the fair, turning slowly, its fat dripping into the fire and sending up an extraordinary smell. The smell of roasting meat in winter air, rich and hot and somehow wrong in its rightness. The smell of warmth produced in a place where warmth should not be possible. You stand and look at it for a full minute. A full-grown ox on a spit over a bonfire on the frozen surface of the River Thames. You think, I have to tell my sister about this. I have to write to her about this. The cold is different here. It is cold. It is February on the river, which is colder than February on the street by several degrees, and the wind has a clear run up the river from the east, and it finds every gap in your clothing. But it is a different kind of cold. The cold you live with in the house is the cold of enclosed spaces where warmth has been tried and partly failed, a cold that is mixed with the effort of all those fires, a cold that is somehow more defeating for the coal that fights it. This cold is clean. This cold is outdoors cold, the kind that asked for nothing from you except acknowledgement, the kind that is simply the fact of February in the open air, not a failure but a condition. You breathe it in. The frost fair presses around you. 2 women are having their portraits done in miniature by a small thin man with a portable kit. 3 young men are trying to slide on the ice and managing it badly. A man with a barrel of something hot is dispensing cups to whoever will pay a penny. Hot spiced ale, you think, from the smell, or perhaps hot gin, which several people near you are drinking with the dedicated attention of people who needed it an hour ago. You move through the fair. Near the centre, not far from the ox spit, you find a bench. Someone has dragged 2 actual benches onto the ice, set up a rough-cut table, and is serving hot food, bowls of something thick, bread with it, steam coming off the bowls in the cold air. You have a penny left after the halfpenny to descend, and the halfpenny you've spent on a cup of the hot ale that turned out to be exactly hot spiced ale. 1 penny. You sit on the bench. The woman serving says, "Broth and bread, penny for both." You hand over your penny. The broth is hot, genuinely hot, the kind of hot that your hands register the moment you wrap them around the bowl, a warmth that moves from the pottery into your palms and up your wrists, the same way the morning tea moves into you, but stronger. More immediate, more convincingly warm, because you are outside in February and the cold is right there, and the hot bowl is right here, and the contrast is pure and simple. You eat your broth on the frozen Thames with the ox turning overhead and the printer printing his commemorative sheets, and the skittle alley knocking and the fire making its smell in the cold air, and you think, this is the warmest I have been in 2 months. Not in the house with its 6 fires, on the frozen river. Not despite the cold, but because of it. Because the cold outside and the heat in the bowl and the warmth of the people pressed together on the ice are all present simultaneously, and you can feel all 3. The cold sharpens the warmth. The warmth is sharp because the cold is sharp. The house tries to eliminate the cold and partially fails, and the result is something neither cold nor warm, something neutral and vaguely defeating. Here, on the ice, there is no attempt at neutral. There is cold and there is warmth, and they are both fully present, and you can feel the difference between them with your whole body. Enough, Agnes said. The right word. On the frozen Thames in February, eating broth from a penny bowl. Enough. You stay until 4 o'clock. You walk further into the fair. Past the printer, a small man with ink on both hands, operating his press with the mechanical certainty of someone doing a familiar thing in an unfamiliar location. Each sheet coming off the press with printed on the Thames, February 1733 at the top, and the date below and whatever news he has assembled this morning on the surface of a river. You stop and look at a finished sheet. The ink is still slightly wet. The words are real words, a report on the weather, a note on ice thickness, a poem about the winter, printed on the Thames. The man looks up. He says, "Penny for the sheet." You say, "I've spent my pennies." He says, "Tell someone about it then. That's worth a penny." You go on. Past a stall selling oysters. Oysters in January on the river ice. The seller standing with his pail and his shucker, with the absolute composure of someone who has decided that extraordinary circumstances are simply circumstances. He has come down here from wherever his usual oyster stall is, Billingsgate probably, or somewhere near the bridge, and set up as though the ice was simply an unusual pavement. The oysters are good cold-weather oysters, fat and salt. The man opens one and hands it to a gentleman in good coat without being asked, the way confident vendors do, and the gentleman eats it and asks the price, and pays it without argument. Cold oysters on a cold day, hot broth from a penny bowl, from the frost fair feeds you with both extremes and nothing in between. Past a woman who is spinning, actually spinning, at a portable wheel she somehow brought onto the ice, the wheel turning, the thread drawing out, the woman's hands doing what hands at spinning wheels do with the particular flowing motion that spinning makes. She's spinning on the frozen Thames and selling the thread from a basket at her side, and she looks entirely normal, entirely at home, her breath making clouds in the cold air and her wheel turning and her thread growing, as if this is simply where she spins now, as if the ice is simply where this work happens. You watch her for a moment. The thread is pale and even. You go on. The ice underfoot is not quite flat. It has texture, ridges where the freeze was uneven, slight rises and depressions where the river's last movement expressed itself before the cold locked everything. You walk carefully, not because you are afraid of falling. The ice is solid. No one is falling. The ice is perhaps a foot thick here near the south bank, according to a man who tested it with a pole. But because the texture of the ice is interesting, is worth feeling through the soles of your shoes. You have walked on London stone and London mud and London cobble and London pavement board, but you have not walked on the Thames. You have walked on the Thames. You stop walking and stand still for a moment in the middle of the frost fair, and you hold this. You're standing on the river that divides the city from the south bank, the river that carries the coal ships from Newcastle, the river that smells in summer in a way that people who live near it stop noticing, the river that is in every description of London you've ever heard. You're standing on it. It has become solid enough to stand on, and people have responded to this by immediately putting a printer on it and roasting an ox. This is London, you think. This is what London does. Oysters in January on the river ice. This seller standing with his pail and his shucker, with the absolute composure of someone who has decided that extraordinary circumstances are simply circumstances and the commerce must continue. Past a group of people who have formed a circle around two men attempting to navigate the ice on wooden contraptions strapped to their feet. Long wooden blades, an attempt at skating that has produced so far 2 falls and considerable entertainment for the observers. Past a woman selling printed ribbons that say, Thames Frost Fair 1733. The ribbons bright blue, the ink slightly smeared, the woman doing good business from people who want evidence of a thing they will tell their grandchildren about. You want evidence. You don't have a penny for a ribbon. You stop at the edge of the crowd near the ox spit. The ox turns slowly. The fat from it drips into the fire with a sound and a smell that is the smell of abundance, meat and heat and winter, the smell of something being given that was not expected. The man tending the spit stands in the warmth of his own making, red-faced, sweating slightly in February, the only person at the frost fair who is actively too warm. You watch him for a moment. He is warm in February on the frozen Thames because he is standing 4 feet from an enormous fire. He is demonstrating with his person everything Agnes taught you. Proximity to the fire within the correct radius produces warmth. Beyond the radius, cold, even here, even on the ice. You look at the people standing at 8 feet from the ox spit. They are cold. They are watching the turning ox with their coats pulled around them and their breath making clouds. Warm enough to stand still, not warm enough to be comfortable. The ox spit demonstrates the fireplace problem on a large scale. 4 feet of warmth, the rest of the world cold. The difference here is the rest of the world is worth being in. The rest of the world is the frozen Thames with its stalls and its printer and its skaters and its bowls of hot broth. The cold that surrounds the ox spit's warmth is a cold you've chosen to be in, a cold that is part of something extraordinary, a cold that is the price of admission to the frost fair. The cold in the house is not a price of admission. The cold in the house is a failure, architectural and practical, a cold that exists despite the intention to be warm, rather than as the frame for something worth choosing. You think, this is the difference. Cold you chose and cold you didn't. It does not make the house cold less cold, but it clarifies something. You walk back through the fair, past the printer's press, past the barber, past the smoking bonfire and the turning ox, and up the stairs to the bank and through the streets back toward Piccadilly. And the whole way back the warmth of the bowl is still in your hands and the smell of roasting meat is still in your hair. And you're not cold. Not the way the house makes you cold. Not the kind of cold that exists in walls and ceilings and wrong chimney flues. You're cold in the honest way of someone who has been outside in February and has come inside now and will be warm. You get back at 6:05. Mrs. Hartley notices. She doesn't say anything about it. March. You wake one morning in the second week of March and the frost on the window is thinner. Not gone, but thin, barely there. a suggestion of frost rather than the full statement that January and February made. You look at it for a moment with the attention you have given it all winter. The morning census. Thin frost. Not nothing, but thin. You get up and the air in the room is cold, but it is a different cold. Smaller, less sure of itself. The cold of a stone room in early spring rather than deep winter. A cold that is losing its authority by degrees. You pull your dress on and the dress is cold in the habitual way. And you go down the stairs and the stairs are cold, but the cold in the staircase has a different quality to it. A quality of retreat, of something that has been holding ground for months and is beginning, very slowly, to give it back. The kitchen, Mrs. Hartley's morning tea, the fire laying, the coal carries. But in the library, when you add coal to the fire that has been going since 7, you stand for a moment and hold your palm toward the grate at 6 feet. Warm, not the imagined warmth of a body that has been cold too long. Actually warm, the March fire reaching further than the January fire reached. The room's stone walls having given back enough of their stored cold to the February air that the fire can now reach further before it is absorbed. 6 feet of warmth today. In January it was 4. You are not a person who cries easily. You stand there in the library with your palm held out at 6 feet from the fire, and you do not cry. But something in you recognizes this as a conclusion, and the recognition of a conclusion after a long effort is a thing that has a feeling, and you stand there for 20 seconds longer than you need to and let it. April. The frost is gone from the window by the first week. By the third week your dress, when you pull it on in the morning, is the temperature of the room, which is to say, it is the temperature of a spring morning in a stone building in London, which is not warm but is entirely bearable, which is a thing you could not have said with honesty in January. Room temperature. After 4 months of cold, the dress is room temperature. You stand there longer than you need to. Your right arm is still through the sleeve and your left is not yet, and you're standing in the attic room in April with the dress half on, and you are not moving because you are feeling this with the precision it deserves. Room temperature, the absence of that particular cold. Not warmth, room temperature is not warmth, but the absence of the morning's first cost, the cost that January and February and March have charged you every morning since you arrived. This morning the dress costs nothing. The dress is simply the dress. You put your left arm through. The room is grey lit with early morning, and you can hear sparrows outside the window. The first sparrows you've heard properly since October, or perhaps you've been hearing them all along, but the cold gave the mornings a quality that pushed the sparrows to the edge of notice. This morning the sparrows are in the foreground. The cold is not in the foreground. The window, no frost. You go to it, and you put your palm flat on the glass. Cold. Of course cold. It is April in London, and the glass faces north, and the night has just ended. But cold in the glass the way glass is cold, the natural cold of a surface that has not been heated, not the cold of something that has been working against you for months. You look out through the glass at the rear of the houses opposite, the grey-brown London rooftops, the April sky which is not yet blue, but is not the flat pewter grey of January. It is the uncertain sky of a season that has not quite committed to itself yet, a sky that is considering its options. The street below, just visible at the corner of the window, a man walking fast in a coat he does not quite need any more, a coat he is wearing out of habit rather than necessity, a coat that will be left hanging inside the door within the week and will not come out again until October. You know this because you are wearing your cloak this morning, going to the market this afternoon, and you're wearing it out of habit, and the street when you step out will be cool rather than cold, and the cloak will be slightly too much, and you will not take it off because you are not yet ready to not wear it. April, you go down to the kitchen. The kitchen fire needs lighting, the coal, the tinder box, the morning's work. But the stairs are cool rather than cold, and the kitchen passage smells of ash, but not of the cold's particular accompaniment to ash, the mineral sharpness of ash in freezing air. The ash this morning smells of ash and nothing else. You kneel on the flags, room temperature flags. You find the ember without difficulty. A good ember, well banked. The coal Mrs. Hartley chose last night, holding its glow faithfully through the March night and the April pre-dawn. You build the fire around it and it catches fast. 3 minutes this morning. Mrs. Hartley comes down and puts the tea on the table. You drink it standing up out of habit. Then you realise the habit was necessary in winter because there was always coal to carry. But the fires need less coal in April. The coal carries are shorter, the scuttles lighter, not lighter in weight, but lighter in the way that a burden is lighter when you know the end of it is in sight. You sit down to drink your tea. This is new, sitting down for the morning tea in April. You have not sat down for it once since November. Agnes comes in. She sees you sitting. She says nothing, but her expression contains something that in another person might be called a smile, and in Agnes is simply the acknowledging of a fact. She pours herself a cup and sits down across from you, both of you sitting, both of you drinking tea at the kitchen table in April. The kitchen is warm from the fire that is already going, properly warm, the morning warmth that the kitchen holds through the whole of the warmer months. The warmth of a room that the overnight cold does not quite reach all the way into. Enough, more than enough this morning. Spring. You stand with the dress half on, and you notice this. You make a note of it in yourself. This is something you will remember. The morning in April when the dress was room temperature. Because you will not always be in this house. You will not always be 16. You will not always be carrying coal in the dark before the family wakes. You will be other things in other places, and when you are those things you will remember this morning, and what it cost to earn it, and what you learned in the earning. Summer. The coal deliveries stop at the end of April. The cellar empties and is not refilled until September, and the summer is a different lesson. The same house, the same architecture, the same thermal failures, running in reverse. In July, your attic room is the hottest room in the house. The same logic that made it coldest in winter makes it hottest in summer. The roof above your ceiling absorbs July sun all day. The tiles storing heat the way they stored cold in January, releasing it downward through the night when the air outside has cooled but the stone has not. By 10 in the evening your room is warm. By midnight it is warm enough that sleep is difficult. By 2 in the morning, on the still July nights when no air moves through the inadequate window, it is the warmest room in the house by several degrees. You lie on your straw mattress in July and sweat and think about the frost on the window. Same building, same position in it, same stone ceiling above you holding whatever July has given it and returning it to you without asking. In winter the building absorbs the cold from outside and gives it to you. In summer the building absorbs the heat from above and gives it to you. The building gives you the extremes. The family in their rooms in the middle of the house, in the middle of the building's thermal mass, get the average. Not comfortable in either season, not exactly. The master bedroom in July is warm, the parlour in January is cold. But the extremes are for the attic, because the attic is at the edge of things. at the top, where the outside and the inside meet most directly, and there is the least distance between what the building is supposed to do and what physics actually allows it to do. Agnes says, when you mention it in August, yes, it's always like this. You say, in winter, coldest, in summer, hottest. She says, yes. You say, because the attic is the closest to outside. She says, because comfort has a direction, and in this house it flows downward. She goes back to her work. You sit with this through August, through September, into the October morning when the first thin frost appears on your window, and you stand looking at it with the knowledge of someone who has been here a full year now, someone who knows what this frost means and where it comes from and what it will become. The second winter. You know this winter. You know it the way you know someone you have lived alongside closely. Not because you know everything about them, but because you've been in close enough quarters to know how they move and what they want and where they become difficult. The coal merchant comes with his first delivery of the second season on the first cold Tuesday of October, and when you see the cart coming down the street from the area steps, you recognise it not as a sight you are seeing, but as a thing returning, the way a familiar smell returns when you walk back into a house you've been away from. The particular cart, the particular horses, the nearer one still with the white mark down his nose, Mr. Blaine's boy with his practised way of positioning the sacks. You hold open the coal hole lid and you wait, and the coal rushes down with its roar and its cloud of black dust, and the cellar fills. 800 pounds of coal, 2 weeks of winter. You know the weight of it now. You know the weight of a full scuttle, and the weight of the stairs, and the weight of 40 pounds of coal at 5:30 in the morning, when your shoulders are still cold from the night. You know all of this as you know the weight of your own hands. In October of your second winter you make one change. You refill the tinderbox more often. Last winter you were caught twice with the tinderbox whose charcloth was finished. Not fully finished, not empty, but depleted enough that the spark took 4 or 5 passes of the flint rather than 2, and both times you were in the master bedroom at 6 in the morning, with the family sleeping behind the curtains, and the sound of flint on steel was more than you wanted to make. In the second winter you check the charcloth every 3 days. This is the difference between a first winter and a second winter. Not that you are stronger, though you are somewhat stronger, and not that you are faster, though you are somewhat faster. The difference is the knowledge of where the failures happen before they happen. Agnes, when you tell her this on a morning in November, says, "That's all experience is, knowing where the failures happen." You say, "It seems like a small thing." She says it's not a small thing. 9 times out of 10, the thing that breaks is the thing you were ignoring because you decided it wasn't important yet. She says, "What else?" You say, "The study flue." Last winter it smoked in January on the cold mornings. The cold meant the air above the flue wasn't warm enough to draw properly. This year I open the study window 2 inches when I first light the fire and close it after 5 minutes. The drawer establishes faster. She says, 2 inches is right. 3 is too much cold air, 1 isn't enough. You say, "I know, I worked it out." She nods, not impressed exactly, more confirming something she expected. She says, "By March you'll know something else. Pay attention to what it is." The second winter holds its lessons differently from the first. The first winter's lessons were the large ones. The window gap, the ceiling height, the chimney proportions, the coal hierarchy. The second winter's lessons are smaller and more particular. The specific behaviour of specific rooms on specific kinds of days. The dining room is worse on days when the wind comes from the northeast. Something about the angle of the street and the angle of the dining room chimney breast means the wind interferes with the drawer on those days, and the fire in the dining room needs building smaller and tighter on a northeast wind morning, or it will smoke. This is not a lesson from Agnes. This is a lesson from observing 40 northeast wind mornings and noting the pattern. This is the kitchen maid's version of the architecture. Not the mathematics, not the theory, but the observed behaviour of this house on these days in this season. The practical knowledge that comes from repetition rather than instruction. You know this winter. You know it the way you know someone you have lived alongside closely, all its properties, all its habits, all the places it finds you when you stop moving. You know the coal comes every 2 weeks in the good grade from Newcastle. You know Mr. Blaine's boy handles the sacks and Mr. Blaine watches. You know the library fire is the only fire in the house that really works, and why. You know the window frames need stuffing by the end of October, or the cold comes in ahead of schedule. You know Agnes's lanolin pot prevents what it is supposed to prevent if you use it every night, without waiting to see if you need it. You are a different person from the girl who stepped off the coach from Shrewsbury 11 months ago. The difference is not in what you can do. You could light a fire in December, you could carry coal in December. The difference is in what you understand while you are doing it. In December you lit the fire and it was an act without context, a thing you were told to do without knowing the full shape of why. Now you light the fire and you know what the fire is doing in the room, what it is failing to do, what the building is doing to resist it. The action is the same. The understanding behind it is entirely different. Agnes says, when you tell her this, on a morning in late September, when the first cold has come back and you're in the kitchen relaying the grate, knowing the shape of a thing doesn't change the thing, but it changes how you carry it. You say, does it get easier? She says, the work doesn't change, the cold doesn't change, but you stop fighting it. You start working with what it is instead of against what you wish it was. You say, 9 years. She says, 9 winters. Yes. You say, do you know all the winters by now? Can you tell one from another? She's quiet for a moment, mixing something in a bowl, the rhythm of it steady and practiced. She says, I know the bad ones. The winter of the year after I arrived, 25, that was the worst I've seen. The Thames froze and the pipes froze and Mrs. Hartley had to fetch water from the carrier for 3 weeks because the pump was solid. That winter I know. The others run together somewhat. They're all January. They're all the same stairs and the same cold and the same fires. She says, but the people are different. You're different from the girl before you and she was different from the girl before her. The house is the same house. The people change. She goes back to her mixing. You think about this. The house is the same house. The people change. You're this winter's Sarah Fletcher, learning the same things every new girl learns in this house, carrying the same coal up the same stairs in the same cold, and in 4 years or 6 years or 9 years there will be another girl, and Agnes will show her the lanolin pot, and the window frame and the library fire, and she will know the house the way you know it now, and you will be somewhere else knowing something else. The knowledge passes. That's how it works, with her letter of introduction and her 4-shilling journey and her expectation that London would be warm. You're not harder exactly. Something more like weathered. You've been outside in the thing you came to understand, and you understand it now, and the understanding has changed the shape of you. On the first cold morning of October, you kneel on the cold stone flags of the kitchen, and you lay the fire with the quick economy of someone who has done this 500 times and knows how. Kindling, coal, the tinder box, 3 strikes, and the charcloth catches. The flame takes in 4 minutes. You add the first coal, the second, the third. You stand up. The kitchen is cold and will be warmer by 7 o'clock. Your breath makes small clouds in the air. The ash bucket is in the corner, waiting. The coal scuttle is ready. You know exactly what the next 6 months will ask of you. You know exactly how to give it. The library on a November evening, the fire properly alight, the room doing what the library does, actually warming. You have come to think of the library differently from the other rooms, as a kind of proof that the building could have been different, that the architects and builders who raised it could have done what needed to be done and chose not to, or didn't know how, or knew and found it too inconvenient to the proportions. Someone is learning. The Edinburgh architect that Mr. Aldgate mentioned. Others somewhere probably. Other architects and engineers and builders working toward the correct mathematics, the proper proportion of flue to grate, the angle that controls the drawer without choking the fire. The answer exists. It is in the physics of the thing. Someone will find it, or is already finding it. And when they do, the buildings will change and the families of London will discover that coal can do what coal was supposed to do. That warmth is not only for 4 feet in front of the grate, but for the whole of the room. Not this winter. Not in any winter you will work in this house. But someone will solve it. And you will have been one of the people who lived in the meantime, carrying the coal that demonstrated the problem. Evening, late November. The kitchen after supper, the fire banked low for the night. Mrs. Hartley's precise economy extended even to the hour of banking. Not at 10:45 or 11:15, but at 11, always 11. The coal positioned and the damper adjusted with the sureness of a person who has done this every night for years and knows exactly what the coals need to get them through until 5:30. The kitchen is warm in its declining way. The warmth of a room that has been heated all day and is now slowly cooling. Not as warm as noon, but still warm enough to call warm. Still the warmest room you have access to at this hour. You sit on the stool near the grate, your hands in your lap. The lanolin has done its work over the winter. The splits are smaller this year, less certain of themselves. The skin on your knuckles tougher and less easily cracked than last winter's skin. You are different in this small specific way. Your hands have learned winter. You're tired in the particular way of an autumn evening after a winter's first long cold day. Not distressed, not depleted. Simply tired in the way that hard, physical work in the cold produces tiredness. A tiredness that is also accomplishment. A tiredness that is also the body account of what it has done. You think about the people in this house. Mrs. Hartley, who puts the tea on the table every cold morning without being asked, and without expecting thanks that are spoken rather than lived. Agnes, who has told you everything about the house, and the cold, and the work in the way that knowledge is supposed to pass, in pieces, while the hands are busy, without ceremony. Mary the nurse, who says thank you on the mornings when the nursery fire is especially hard to light and you do it right anyway. William the footman, who broke in February and wore 2 coats, and who now, this second winter, has begun wearing the second coat from October onward, without waiting to see if pride will get him through. Mr. Aldgate, who asked what you thought, and listened to what you said. Mrs. Aldgate, who asked about your room. You have been in service for 11 months. You do not yet know what you are becoming, only that you are becoming it, only that the person who will be 25 and 30 and 40 is being shaped right now, in this kitchen, on this stool, in the warmth of a declining fire. shaped by the cold and the work and the knowledge of how things function, and why they don't when they don't. You think about the frost fair, the hot broth on the frozen Thames, the ox on its spit. You think about the view from the street, warmer than the house. The baker's warmth and the coffee house warmth and the horse standing at the post steaming in the cold air. You think about what Agnes said. Comfort has a direction. In this house, it flows downward. Yes, and you're at the bottom of that direction. And you will not be at the bottom forever, not in this house or any other. Not if you carry what you know the way you carry the coal, steadily, every morning, without stopping. The fire settles. A log shifts. There are no logs, only coal, but the coal shifts in the way that settled fires shift, and the sound is the sound of something finding its final position. The clock in the hall counts 10. You should be upstairs. Tomorrow is another 5:30 morning, another round of fires and coal and ash, another day of the winter's work. Your body knows this, and is already preparing for it in the way bodies prepare. The heaviness in your eyes, the slowing of your thoughts, the particular looseness in your shoulders that means the day is done. You do not move yet. The kitchen holds its warmth a little longer, and you sit in it. You sit in the last warmth of the kitchen fire on a November evening in 1733 in London, at the bottom of a beautiful house that does not keep the cold out, in a body that has learned the weight of 40 pounds of coal and the feel of frost on the inside of a window and the particular warmth of a cup of tea held in cold hands. You sit in it and you breathe. The clock has struck 10, and the fire is banking and the house is settling into night around you. Your hands are in your lap, the lanolin worked into them so thoroughly now that the knuckle lines are smaller, the skin calloused in the useful way rather than the painful way, the hands of someone who works in the cold and has learned to maintain themselves in it. Tomorrow there will be coal to carry. Tomorrow there will be fires to lay in cold rooms, for people who will wake to find them burning. Tomorrow there will be the staircase in the dark and the kitchen passage with its cold ash smell and the morning tea, and Mrs. Hartley's assessment of the day. But that is tomorrow. Tonight you are sitting in the warmth of the kitchen fire. Let the cold wait. It will wait. It always waits. It has been waiting in the walls of this house since October, and it will still be waiting in March, and you know now that this is what it does. It waits, patient and cold and perfectly still, in the stone and the window frames and the 12-foot ceilings and the wrong chimneys. It waits for the fire to stop. It waits for the morning before the fire is lit. It waits for the room beyond the 4-foot radius. It will always wait. But so will you. You have learned how to wait this winter. You have learned how to hold the 4 feet of warmth and know it for what it is. Enough, not everything, not what the house promised, but enough. And to carry it with you when you leave the radius and go back into the cold that surrounds it. You are warm enough right now, fed enough, safe enough. The year accumulates in you the way the cold accumulates in the walls, not as a list of events, but as a texture, a depth, a thing you carry in the body that is not the same as memory, but is related to it. You carry the frost fair the way the stone carries the cold, stored, available, releasing itself when the conditions are right. You carry Agnes's voice in the kitchen, and the weight of 40 pounds of coal on the stairs, and Mrs. Aldgate asking about your room. You carry the hot broth on the ice, and William finally wearing the second coat, and Master Charles asking why the room was cold. You carry Mr. Aldgate's look across the library table, the Edinburgh architect, the mathematics. Someone is working on this. Somewhere in Edinburgh or London or wherever architects go when they're thinking about fire and air and the physics of warmth, someone is working on the correct proportion. The problem has been identified. The calculation exists. It is only a matter of time and money and the slow acceptance of people who've been building houses one way for 50 years that there is a better way. You think about the houses that will be built after the mathematics is understood, the rooms that will actually warm, the coal that will do what coal is supposed to do, the people who will wake in those rooms without frost on their windows, who will come down stairs that are simply cold rather than architecturally cold, who will eat their supper at a dining table where the room has actually been heated rather than the fire has simply been burning. They will not know why the rooms are warm. The warmth will simply be there, the way the warmth is not simply there for you. They will not think about throat proportions or draw strength or the height of ceilings. The warmth will be a thing they have without having earned it through understanding. That is fine. That is as it should be. It is not necessary to understand why warmth works. It is only necessary to have it. You happen to have come to warmth through understanding, through a winter of cold that taught you the shape of the problem, and the understanding is a thing you carry now that you will carry always. But the people in the future warm houses do not need to earn it the way you earned it. They just need it. You hope they have it. You hope the houses are warm. For now, this kitchen, this November evening, this declining fire, for now, enough. This is enough. Let your eyes go heavy. They're already heavy. The day has been long and cold and thoroughly lived, and the body is ready to stop. The clock somewhere above you, the bracket clock on the second floor, will count the quarter hours through the night. You will not hear most of them. The mice in the wainscoting will go about their business. The cold outside will press against the window glass and find the gaps you stuffed with linen, and find them inadequate and come through anyway. The slow patient seep of cold through imperfect seals. It is all right. You know all of this now. You know how the house works. You know what winter is in a building like this, what it costs, where it wins, where the coal can hold it and where it cannot. You know the mathematics of the chimney flue and the physics of the window gap and the thermal memory of a stone wall in February. You know these things in your body, not just in your understanding. Let that knowledge rest now, with you, in the warmth of the kitchen as the fire goes to embers. Let your thoughts slow. They are already slowing. The day's work releasing its hold. The names and tasks and scuttles and stairs dissolving back into the general substance of a winter's day. Individual things becoming part of a larger continuity. The continuity of mornings and fires and the work of keeping a household alive against the cold. Outside, in Sackville Street, the night continues its business. The watchman calls the half hour. His voice moves up the street and fades. A carriage passes, its wheels a brief clatter on the stones, the sound of someone going somewhere at 10:30 at night, going somewhere warm, or going somewhere cold, the same city containing both simultaneously. The city is always warmer than the house. You know why now. You will always know why. Let the knowing rest. Let the fire rest. It will be cold before morning and warm again by 7 and cold again by midnight. And this is the rhythm of the thing. The rhythm of coal and cold and the building that stands between them. The rhythm that will continue for as long as there are houses with wrong chimneys and stone walls and windows that let the cold in. But not tonight. Tonight the kitchen is warm. Tonight you are in the kitchen, in the warm, in the last warmth of the fire before the night takes it back. Your eyes close. The sound of the house, the clock, the settling fire, the mouse, the distant street. Each sound a little softer than the last. Each sound further away. The sounds of a city that does not stop moving, does not stop generating its collective warmth, its horse warmth and oven warmth, and coffee house warmth, its 500,000 bodies warmth, all of it out there in the cold streets that are warmer than the houses. You're inside. You're in the warm. The warm is 4 feet wide and you're in it. That is enough. Let sleep come the way it comes to a body that has been cold and is warm now, that has been working and has stopped, that has been learning and has learned. Let it come the way the morning tea comes to cold hands, quietly, without ceremony, with the simple warmth of the necessary. Let the kitchen hold you for a few minutes more. Let the fire go to coals, and the coals go to embers, and the embers go to that last orange glow that will still be there at 5:30 when you come back to find it, when you kneel again on the cold flags and rake the ash forward and find the burning point at the centre of the mound, still breathing, still there. Come back tomorrow and you will find it, but that is tomorrow. Tonight the fire is still going. Tonight you are warm. Centuries will pass. The house on Sackville Street will stand for 150 years before something takes it down. Fire, or the demands of a new century, or the weight of time on lime and brick. The street will keep its name. The city will keep growing. The coal smoke that hangs over everything in January 1733 will get worse before it gets better, will get so thick in the 1950s that people will not be able to see across the street, will be one of the last gasps of the coal age before the city turns to other fuels, other warmths, other ways of fighting January. The frost fairs will stop when the old London Bridge is replaced. The new bridge has wider arches, and the river runs faster, and the Thames will not freeze again in the way it froze in February 1733. The woman serving broth on the ice will be the last of something, though she does not know it and will not know it until the years prove it. The wrong chimneys will be fixed. Not immediately. Not in any winter Sarah Fletcher will carry coal through. But eventually, the architect from Edinburgh will publish his mathematics. Others will develop the principles further. The proportions will be corrected in new houses and in old ones that can afford the renovation. The coal will do what it was supposed to do, and the rooms of London will become warmer, and the people in them will stop sitting in their coats at the dinner table, and will stop having 3 blankets on the bed in February, and will start to understand warmth as a baseline rather than a daily achievement. But the cold will always be there, outside the glass, waiting in the wall, pooling at the foot of the bed on February nights, and people will always come in from the cold to find warmth, will always hold the cup in cold hands, will always feel the fire's 4-foot radius and decide that 4 feet is enough. Some things don't change. The body doesn't change. The body's need for warmth at the end of a long cold day, that doesn't change. The particular relief of warmth after cold, the warmth that is most itself when you have been without it, the warmth that means you have arrived somewhere and can stop. This doesn't change. You are here now, in your warm. Whatever winter you're in, whatever house, whatever stone walls and wrong chimneys as window gaps and ceilings too high for the warm air to be useful. You're in your warm and the cold is outside, and everything you need for tonight is here. You have earned this rest. You have carried the coal. You have laid the fires. You have learned the house and the cold and the relationship between them. You have found the warm in the cold places, and you have held it when you could and known when to let it go. The fire is embers now. The kitchen is still warm. You're still warm. Your hands in your lap, your eyes behind their lids, the sound of the house and the sound of the street, and the sound of your own breathing, slower now, quieter. The room held you. It holds you still. Let it. Good night. You're already on the edge of sleep and you know it. You can feel the way the thoughts have changed quality. Thinner, less solid. The way a coal fire changes quality in its last hour. Still present, but no longer dense. You're still in the kitchen. You're still on the stool. The embers in the grate are still orange. These are facts that will stop being facts soon. Or rather, they will stop being facts you are attending to, and the kitchen will continue as a kitchen, and you will continue in it, but in the way you continue in your body through the night, without managing it, without participation. Let the sleep come. It comes from the feet first, this particular kind of sleep. The sleep of someone who has been on their feet since before dawn. You notice your feet stop reporting. The cold stone they've been standing on and walking over all day, gone. The particular ache at the ball of the right foot from the worn heel of the right shoe, gone. The feet release into the floor, and the floor is only warmth from here. The warmth of not caring about the floor, up through the ankles, the tired pull at the Achilles that you've been aware of since 4 o'clock. Gone. The shoulders. The shoulders have been carrying the coal all morning, and they have been a fact of your body all day. A fact you've been managing, adjusting, holding differently in the afternoon than in the morning when the weight was fresh. The shoulders, gone. Not absent, present in the way that something resting is present, present without demand. The hands, last to go because the hands are always last. They've been working since before the coal carries, since the fire lighting and the tinderbox, and they've had the cold in them since before the fire was lit, and they've been at coal and ash and water and cold metal and cold pottery all day. The hands stop reporting. The lanolin and the warmth and the evening and the approaching sleep take the hands. The lines at the knuckles are small tonight. The skin is dry but intact. The hands have been faithful today. The hands rest. Your breathing slows. You can hear it slow. You're still just close enough to waken to hear your own breathing change, to hear it find the rhythm of the body at rest rather than the body at work. Not the hard breathing of the coal carries, not the controlled breathing of the fire lighting, not the ordinary breathing of the errand walking. The breathing of sleep approaching, the kitchen around you, still warm, still real, the embers putting their orange light out into the room, not enough to read by, not enough to see the far wall clearly, but enough to know where you are. The copper pots on their hooks, the broad table, the dresser with its plates, the bread oven in the wall with its black door. You've been in this kitchen every morning before light. You've been in this kitchen every evening after supper. You've spent more hours in this kitchen than in any other room in the house. More hours than in your attic. More hours than anywhere except perhaps the rooms where the coal carries took you. And even then the kitchen is the sum of all the rooms, the beginning and end of every journey through the house. You know this kitchen. You know it the way you know your hands. Let it hold you a little longer. Let the orange of the embers hold its place. Let the smell of the kitchen, coal dust and ash and the remains of supper, mutton bones in the pot for tomorrow's broth, the onion smell and the tallow smell of the candle you've been burning down to its last inch. Let these smells be the room you're in. Let them be around you. Let them be ordinary. They are ordinary. After 11 months, they are ordinary. They were strange once, in December. Strange in the way that a new place is strange, a new house is strange, before the house becomes yours, in the way that places become yours by being lived in. This kitchen was a strange kitchen in December. Now it is the kitchen. Your kitchen, in the sense that any place you work in until it is ordinary is yours. You're warm. You're almost asleep. The clock upstairs strikes the half hour. 10:30. Somewhere above you the family has been asleep for an hour. Mr. Aldgate, whose ledger work on Thursdays keeps him up late, has put the accounts away. The children have been asleep since 8. Master Charles with his book under his pillow where he thinks no one will find it, and Agnes has found it twice and put it back without comment. Mrs. Aldgate is wrapped in her shawls. The house sleeps. The cold begins its nightly reclamation. Every night it does this. The fires burn down. The warmth generated by the day's cold disperses through the walls and the ceilings and the chimney flues, and the cold that has been waiting, patient, cold, in no hurry, begins to take back what the day's fires temporarily held. By 3 o'clock in the morning the master bedroom will be measurably colder than it was at 10 o'clock. By 5 the whole house will have surrendered most of the day's warmth back to the walls and the night air and the wrong chimneys, and you will come down at 5:30 and find the ember at the centre of the banked fire and begin again. This is the rhythm. This is the rhythm you live in. Let the rhythm be. Let the cold reclaim the rooms above you. The study, the dining room, the nursery with its sleeping children, the master bedroom with its marble mantelpiece and its turkey carpet and its currently sleeping occupants. Let the walls take the warmth back. Let the cold settle in the corridors and the stairs and the passageways, where no fire has ever been lit and no fire will be lit tonight. It is all right. You know where the ember will be at 5:30. You know how to find it. You know how to build the fire around it carefully, giving it space, giving it something to grow toward. You know the coal and the kindling and the proportion that works in the kitchen, great which works correctly, which was built by someone who knew the mathematics, even if they didn't know they knew it, who built one fireplace in this house that does what a fireplace should do. You will find it. You will come back in 7 hours and find it. But now, sleep. Let the kitchen go from a room you are in to a room you are resting in. The way a fire goes from a fire you're tending to a fire that tends itself in the last embers. Let the thoughts go the way the coal ash goes, grey, soft, no longer the shape of what it was, floating away on whatever moves through when you stop paying attention. You're 16 years old. You're in London. You've carried coal up 5 flights of stairs this morning, and you will carry it again tomorrow morning, and you know why. You know where the cold comes from. You know the name of the problem and the shape of it, and the place it waits. You are warm enough. You've been cold, and you are warm enough. This is what warmth is really. Not the absence of cold, but the sufficiency of warmth. The amount that lets you stop attending to it. The amount that lets the body trust that it has enough and release its vigilance. You are warm enough to release the vigilance. The kitchen holds enough warmth for this, for a body that has been cold all day to arrive at enough. Enough. Let the enough be. Let the orange of the embers pulse in the grate, slower, quieter. The fire's breathing going the same way yours goes, the same slow release into the rhythm of rest. Let the house settle around you. Let the frost form on the window in the attic 2 floors above, doing what frost does, patient and cold and geometric, making its fern shapes on the glass that faces January. The frost does not know you are down here in the warm. The frost is doing its work regardless. Tomorrow morning you will go up to that window and look at it, and you will know all the reasons for it, and you will get dressed in the cold room and come down the cold stairs and lay the fire. But that is tomorrow, and tomorrow is not yet. Tonight, warm. Tonight, the kitchen. Tonight, your breathing. Slowing. Sleep comes to a body that has been cold and is warm now, the way warmth comes to cold hands around a cup of morning tea, without announcement, without negotiation, simply arriving and staying and being exactly what it is. You're in the kitchen, you're warm, the embers are still orange. Sleep